Peace, family. It's your brother, Marc Lamont Hill. Welcome to Night School, a very special edition of Night School. Of course, we are here for a very, very particular reason, and y'all know what it is. It is a high-stakes debate that's happening tonight, live at the National Constitution Center in the world's greatest city, Philadelphia. Just steps away from the U.S. Constitution, was signed in 1787. It is a debate between Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump. It's the first time that these two will be meeting on the debate stage. Of course, we had the Trump-Biden fiasco that changed the entire complexion of the election a few months ago, but now these two are meeting up, and we're only 8 weeks from Election Day, which means that it's probably the only time we're going to see these two debate, because there is no other debate scheduled. The lectern is 6 feet apart. That means they're going to be close, but there's not going to be a lot of arguing because they are going to be muted when the other person is speaking. And if you remember, there was a lot of controversy about that. You know, Kamala Harris was very adamant about that. And I think the reason made sense is that Donald Trump is an interrupter and he's a bully. And so we didn't want to see that happen. So it'll be interesting to see each candidate have an opportunity to be to deliver their words uninterrupted. Now, debates are as good as their moderators. And tonight we got two pros on the job. We have ABC's David Muir and Lindsay Davis. Now, the question is not, will they do a good job at asking questions? We know they're professional question askers. They're professional question readers. They're excellent talkers and they're seasoned journalists. But the question is, are they going to fact check the candidates? Everyone's saying, will they fact check Donald Trump? And they should, but they should also fact check Kamala Harris. Everybody should be fact checked. But sometimes lately there's been more politeness than there has been fact checking. But if that happens, don't worry, because factcheck.org is going to be doing live fact checking of everybody. They're doing it on X and they're doing it on Thread. So what you can do is, while you watch us, because you don't want to go nowhere else, while you watch us, you can also check out the fact checking. Of course, I'll be fact checking, with y'all too, because we got the comments section. I'll be watching it with y'all in the comments, laughing at times, yelling at times, frustrated at times, because there's a lot at stake here, and politicians act like politicians, and we got to make sure that we hold them accountable. It's an important race, maybe the most important race we've seen in a long time, maybe the most high stakes debate we've seen in a long time. Kamala Harris has been riding a wave that is important to consider, given the fact that she entered the race late, but she hasn't had to take a political challenge yet in terms of a controversy, a scandal, or a bad debate performance. Let's see what happens tonight when she goes head to head with Donald Trump. My best guess is she handles herself quite well. She did quite well against Joe Biden in the Democratic primary 4 years ago. Donald Trump is a formidable debate opponent, not because of skill or intellect or knowledge or experience or integrity, but because he's a showman. And these are, in fact, shows. Now, it's no secret that one of the big states is Pennsylvania. It's a high stakes area, and the debate is taking place in Philadelphia. The Harris campaign has recently flooded the state with political ads, many of which hammer Trump on Project 2025. And Donald Trump knows that it's high stakes too, because he is going to all the places in between Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, what we call Pennsyltucky, that part of Pennsylvania that leans red, that often votes Republican. So you see him in Harrisburg, you see him in Wilkes-Barre, which is the neighboring town to Scranton. You see him in Johnstown, and the polls have them neck and neck. So we'll keep watching. We'll see what happens. We're just a few seconds away from the debate starting. As soon as the debate starts, you will not have to see my ugly mug, and you will not have to hear my voice. Instead, you'll have the two presidential candidates up for grabs. In the meantime, I want to send a quick shout out to everybody here from the Marc Lamont Hill official community. Also, if you're watching on Twitter, come over to YouTube if you want to. You can hit that like button. You can hit that subscribe button. You can follow us live. And I want to add that after the debate is over, we're not done. That's where the analysis starts. And I'm talking about not just me, but we also will have Dr. David Johns here later. He is the CEO and executive director of the National Black Justice Coalition, someone who worked with President Obama during his times. We also have Diante Johnson. He is the founder and president of the Black Conservative Federation. He also is a Donald Trump surrogate. And I mean, he identifies as such. He admits that. He puts that on his business card. And we also have Tiffany Dena Loftin, who is a national education and labor organizer. She's also the host of How We Get Free podcast. She was appointed by President Obama to serve on the White House initiative on educational excellence for African Americans in higher education. So she'll have a very specific point of view, but she's also been deeply critical of the Democratic Party and their policies. So we'll have a kind of Democrat perspective, Republican perspective, and then a
Welcome to you both. It's wonderful to have you. It's an honor to have you both here tonight.
Good evening. We are looking forward to a spirited and thoughtful debate.
So let's get started. I want to begin tonight with the issue that voters repeatedly say is their number one issue, and that is the economy and the cost of living in this country. Vice President Harris, you and President Trump were elected 4 years ago, and your opponent on the stage here tonight often asks his supporters, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? When it comes to the economy, do you believe Americans are better off than they were 4 years ago?
So I was raised as a middle-class kid, and I am actually the only person on this stage who has a plan that is about lifting up the middle class and working people of America. I believe in the ambition, the aspirations, the dreams of the American people. And that is why I imagine and have actually a plan to build what I call an opportunity economy. Because here's the thing. We know that we have a shortage of homes and housing, and the cost of housing is too expensive for far too many people. We know that young families need support to raise their children, and I intend on extending a tax cut for those families of $6,000, which is the largest child tax credit that we have given in a long time, so that those young families can afford to buy a crib, buy a car seat, buy clothes for their children. My passion, one of them, is small businesses. My mother raised my sister and me, but there was a woman who helped raise us. We call her our second mother. She was a small business owner. I love our small businesses. My plan is to give a $50,000 tax deduction to start up small businesses, knowing they are part of the backbone of America's economy. My opponent, on the other hand, his plan is to do what he has done before, which is to provide a tax cut for billionaires and big corporations, which will result in $5 trillion to America's deficit. My opponent has a plan that I call the Trump's sales tax, which would be a 20% tax on everyday goods that you rely on to get through the month. Economists have said that that Trump sales tax would actually result for middle-class families in about $4,000 more a year because of his policies and his ideas about what should be the backs of middle-class people paying for tax cuts for billionaires.
President Trump, I'll give you 2 minutes.
First of all, I have no sales tax. That's an incorrect statement. She knows that. We're doing tariffs on other countries. Other countries are going to finally, after 75 years, pay us back for all that we've done for the world. And the tariff will be substantial in some cases. I took in billions and billions of dollars, as you know, from China. In fact, they never took the tariff off because there was so much money they can't. It would totally destroy everything that they've set out to do. They're taking in billions of dollars from China and other places. They've left the tariffs on. When I had it, I had tariffs, and yet I had no inflation. Look, we've had a terrible economy because inflation which is really known as a country buster. It breaks up countries. We have inflation like very few people have ever seen before, probably the worst in our nation's history. We were at 21%, but that's being generous because many things are 50, 60, 70, and 80% higher than they were just a few years ago. This has been a disaster for people, for the middle class, but for every class. On top of that, we have millions of people pouring into our country from prisons and jails, from mental institutions and insane asylums, and they're coming in and they're taking jobs that are occupied right now by African Americans and Hispanics, and also unions. Unions are going to be affected very soon. And you see what's happening. You see what's happening with towns throughout the United States. You look at Springfield, Ohio. You look at Aurora in Colorado. They are taking over the towns. They're taking over buildings. They're going in violently. These are the people that Xi and Biden led into our country, and they're destroying our country. They're dangerous. They're at the highest level of criminality. and we have to get them out. We have to get them out fast. I created one of the greatest economies in the history of our country. I'll do it again and even better.
We are going to get to immigration and border security during this debate, but I would like to let Vice President Harris respond on the economy here.
Well, I would love to. Let's talk about what Donald Trump left us. Donald Trump left us the worst unemployment since the Great Depression. Donald Trump left us the worst public health epidemic in a century. Donald Trump left us the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War. And what we have done is clean up Donald Trump's mess. What we have done and what I intend to do is build on what we know are the aspirations and the hopes of the American people. But I'm going to tell you all in this debate tonight, you're going to hear from the same old tired playbook, a bunch of lies, grievances, and name calling. What you're going to hear tonight is a detailed and dangerous plan called Project 2025 that the former president intends on implementing if he were elected again. I believe very strongly that the American people want a president who understands the importance of bringing us together, knowing we have so much more in common than what separates us. And I pledge to you to be a president for all Americans.
President Trump will give you a minute here to respond.
Number one, I have nothing to do, as you know, and as she knows better than anyone, I have nothing to do with Project 2025. That's out there. I haven't read it. I don't want to read it purposely. I'm not going to read it. This was a group of people that got together. They came up with some ideas, I guess some good, some bad, but it makes no difference. I have nothing to do. Everybody knows I'm an open book. Everybody knows what I'm going to do. Cut taxes very substantially and create a great economy like I did before. We had the greatest economy. We got hit with a pandemic. And the pandemic was not since 1917, where 100 million people died, has there been anything like it. We did a phenomenal job with the pandemic. We handed them over a country where the economy and where the stock market was higher than it was before the pandemic came in. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. We made ventilators for the entire world. We got gowns, we got masks, we did things that nobody thought possible. And people give me credit for rebuilding the military. They give me credit for a lot of things, but not enough credit for the great job we did with the pandemic. But the only jobs they got were bounce back jobs. These were jobs bounce back, and it bounced back and it went to their benefit. But I was the one that created them. They know it, and so does everybody else.
Vice President Harris, I'll let you respond.
So Donald Trump has no plan for you. And when you look at his economic plan, it's all about tax breaks for the richest people. I am offering what I describe as an opportunity economy, and the best economists in our country, if not the world, have reviewed our relative plans for the future of America. What Goldman Sachs has said is that Donald Trump's plan would make the economy worse. Mine would strengthen the economy. What the Wharton School has said is Donald Trump's plan would actually explode the deficit. 16 Nobel laureates have described his economic plan as something that would increase inflation and by the middle of next year would invite a recession. You just have to look at where we are and where we stand on the issues. And I'd invite you to know that Donald Trump actually has no plan for you because he is more interested in defending himself than he is in looking out for you.
It's just a soundbite. They gave her that to say. Look, I went to the Wharton School of Finance, and many of those professors, the top professors, think my plan is a brilliant plan. It's a great plan. It's a plan that's going to bring up our worth, our value as a country. It's going to make people want to be able to go and work and create jobs and create a lot of good, solid money for our country. And just to finish off, she doesn't have a plan. She copied Biden's plan, and it's like 4 sentences, like run, spot, run. 4 sentences that are just, oh, we'll try and lower taxes. She doesn't have a plan. Take a look at her plan. She doesn't have a plan.
Mr. President, I do want to drill down on something you both brought up. The Vice President brought up your tariffs. You responded, and let's drill down on this because your plan is what she calls is essentially a national sales tax. Your proposal calls for tariffs, as you pointed out here, on foreign imports across the board. You recently said that you might double your plan, imposing tariffs up to 20% on goods coming into this country. As you know, many economists say that with tariffs at that level, costs are then passed on to the consumer. Vice President Harris has argued it'll mean higher prices on gas, food, clothing, medication, arguing it costs the typical family nearly $4,000 a year. Do you believe Americans can afford higher prices because of tariffs?
They're not going to have higher prices. What's going to have and who's going to have higher prices is China and all of the countries that have been ripping us off for years. I was the only president ever. China was paying us hundreds of billions of dollars, and so were other countries. And, you know, if she doesn't like them, they should have gone out and they should have immediately cut the tariffs. But those tariffs are there 3.5 years now under their administration. We are going to take in billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars. I had no inflation, virtually no inflation. They had the highest inflation perhaps in the history of our country, because I've never seen a worse period of time. People can't go out and buy cereal or bacon or eggs or anything else. The people of our country are absolutely dying with what they've done. They've destroyed the economy. And all you have to do is look at a poll. The polls say 80 and 85 and even 90% that the Trump economy was great, that their economy was terrible.
Vice President Harris, I do want to ask for your response, and you heard what the president said there, because the Biden administration did keep a number of the Trump tariffs in place. So how do you respond?
Well, let's be clear that the Trump administration resulted in a trade deficit, one of the highest we've ever seen in the history of America. He invited trade wars. You want to talk about his deal with China? What he ended up doing is, under Donald Trump's presidency, he ended up selling American chips to China to help them improve and modernize their military, basically sold us out, when a policy about China should be in making sure the United States of America wins the competition for the 21st century, which means focusing on the details of what that requires, focusing on relationships with our allies, focusing on investing in American-based technology so that we win the race on AI, on quantum computing, focusing on what we need to do to support America's workforce so that we don't end up having on the short end of the stick in terms of workers' rights. But what Donald Trump did, let's talk about this, with COVID, is he actually thanked President Xi for what he did during COVID. Look at his tweet. Thank you, President Xi, exclamation point, when we know that Xi was responsible for lacking and not giving us transparency about the origins of COVID.
President Trump, I'll let you respond.
First of all, they bought their chips from Taiwan. We hardly make chips anymore because of philosophies like they have and policies like they have. I don't say her because she has no policy. Everything that she believed 3 years ago and 4 years ago is out the window. She's going to my philosophy now. In fact, I was going to send her a MAGA hat. She's gone to my philosophy. But if she ever got elected, she'd change it. And it will be the end of our country. She's a Marxist. Everybody knows she's a Marxist. Her father's a Marxist professor in economics, and he taught her well. But when you look at what she's done to our country, and when you look at these millions and millions of people that are pouring into our country monthly, where it's, I believe, 21 million people, not the 15 that people say, and I think it's a lot higher than the 21. That's bigger than New York State pouring in. And just look at what they're doing to our country. They're criminals. Many of these people coming in are criminals. And that's bad for our economy, too. You know, you mentioned before, we'll talk about immigration later. Well, bad immigration is the worst thing that can happen to our economy. They have, and she has, destroyed our country with policy that's insane. Almost policy that you'd say they have to hate our country.
President Trump, thank you. Lindsay?
I want to turn to the issue of abortion. President Trump, you've often touted that you were able to kill Roe v. Wade. Last year, you said that you were proud to be the most pro-life president in American history. Then last month, you said that your administration would be great for women and their reproductive rights. In your home state of Florida, you surprised many with regard to your 6-week abortion ban, because you initially had said that it was too short. And you said, quote, I'm going to be voting that we need more than 6 weeks. But then the very next day, you reversed course and said you would vote to support the 6-week ban. Vice President Harris says that women shouldn't trust you on the issue of abortion because you've changed your position so many times. Therefore, why should they trust you?
Well, the reason I'm doing that vote is because the plan is, as you know, the vote is, they have abortion in the 9th month. They even have, and you can look at the governor of West Virginia, the previous governor of West Virginia, not the current governor, who's doing an excellent job, but the governor before, He said the baby will be born and we will decide what to do with the baby. In other words, we'll execute the baby. And that's why I did that, because that predominates, because they're radical. The Democrats are radical in that. And her vice presidential pick, which I think was a horrible pick, by the way, for our country, because he is really out of it. But her vice presidential pick says abortion in the 9th month is absolutely fine. He also says execution after birth. It's execution, no longer abortion, because the baby is born, is okay. And that's not okay with me, hence the vote. But what I did is something for 52 years, they've been trying to get Roe v. Wade into the states. And through the genius and heart and strength of 6 Supreme Court justices, we were able to do that. Now, I believe in the exceptions for rape, incest, and life of the mother. I believe strongly in it. Ronald Reagan did also. 85% of Republicans do. Exceptions. Very important. But we were able to get it, and now states are voting on it. And for the first time, you're going to see, look, this is an issue that's torn our country apart for 52 years. Every legal scholar, every Democrat, every Republican, liberal, conservative, they all wanted this issue to be brought back to the states where the people could vote. And that's what happened. Now, Ohio, the vote was somewhat liberal. Kansas, the vote was somewhat liberal, much more liberal than people would have thought. But each individual state is voting. It's the vote of the people now. It's not tied up in the federal government. I did a great service in doing it. It took courage to do it. And the Supreme Court had great courage in doing it. And I give tremendous credit to those 6 justices.
There is no state in this country where it is legal to kill a baby after it's born. Madam Vice President, I want to get your response to President Trump.
Well, as I said, you're going to hear a bunch of lies, and that's not actually a surprising fact. Let's understand how we got here. Donald Trump hand-selected 3 members of the United States Supreme Court with the intention that they would undo the protections of Roe v. Wade. And they did exactly as he intended. And now in over 20 states, there are Trump abortion bans, which make it criminal for a doctor or nurse to provide health care. In one state, it provides prison for life. Trump abortion bans that make no exception even for rape and incest, which understand what that means. A survivor of a crime of violation to their body does not have the right to make a decision about what happens to their body next. That is immoral. And one does not have to abandon their faith or deeply held beliefs to agree. The government, and Donald Trump certainly, should not be telling a woman what to do with her body. I have talked with women around our country. You want to talk about this is what people wanted? Pregnant women who want to carry a pregnancy to term, suffering from a miscarriage, being denied care in an emergency room because the healthcare providers are afraid they might go to jail, and she's bleeding out in a car in the parking lot. She didn't want that. Her husband didn't want that. A 12 or 13-year-old survivor of incest being forced to carry a pregnancy to term. They don't want that. And I pledge to you, when Congress passes a bill to put back in place the protections of Roe v. Wade, as President of the United States, I will proudly sign it into law. But understand, if Donald Trump were to be reelected, he will sign a national abortion ban. Understand, in his Project 2025, there would be a national abortion, a monitor that would be monitoring your pregnancies, your miscarriages. I think the American people believe that certain freedoms, in particular the freedom to make decisions about one's own body, should not be made by the government.
Thank you, Vice President Harris.
Well, there she goes again. It's a lie. I'm not signing a ban, and there's no reason to sign a ban, because we've gotten what everybody wanted. Democrats, Republicans, and everybody else, and every legal scholar wanted it to be brought back into the states, and the states are voting. And it may take a little time, but for 52 years, this issue has torn our country apart, and they've wanted it back in the states. And I did something that nobody thought was possible. The states are now voting. What she says is an absolute lie. And as far as the abortion ban, no, I'm not in favor of abortion ban, but it doesn't matter, because this issue has now been taken over by the states.
Would you veto a national abortion ban if it
Well,
came
I
to your
won't
desk?
have to, because again, two things. Number one, she said she'll go back to Congress. She'll never get the vote. It's impossible for her to get the vote, especially now with the 50-50 and essentially 50-50 in both Senate and the House. She's not going to get the vote. She can't get the vote. She won't even come close to it. So it's just talk. You know what it reminds me of? When they said they're going to get student loans terminated, and it ended up being a total catastrophe. The student loans, and then I think probably her boss, if you call him a boss, he spends all his time on the beach. But look, her boss went out and said, we'll do it again. We'll do it a different way. And he went out, got rejected again by the Supreme Court. So all these students got taunted with this whole thing about this whole idea, and how unfair that would have been. Part of the reason they lost to the millions and millions of people that had to pay off their student loans. They didn't get it for free, but they were saying it's the same way that they talked about that they talk about abortion.
But if I could just get a yes or no, because your running mate, J.D. Vance, has said that you would veto if it did come to your desk.
Well, I didn't discuss it with J.D. In all fairness, J.D., and I don't mind if he has a certain view, but I think he was speaking for me, but I really didn't. Look, we don't have to discuss it, because she'd never be able to get it, just like she couldn't get student loans. They couldn't get student loans. They didn't even come close to getting student loans. They taunted young people and a lot of other people that had loans. They can never get this approved. So it doesn't matter what she says about going to Congress. Well, wonderful. Let's go to Congress. Do it. But the fact is that for years, they wanted to get it out of Congress and out of the federal government. And we did something that everybody said couldn't be done. And now you have a vote of the people on abortion.
Vice President Harris, I want to give you your time to respond, but I do want to ask, would you support any restrictions on a woman's right to an abortion?
I absolutely support reinstating the protections of Roe v. Wade. And as you rightly mentioned, nowhere in America is a woman carrying a pregnancy to term and asking for an abortion. That is not happening. It's insulting to the women of America. And understand what has been happening under Donald Trump's abortion bans. Couples who pray and dream of having a family are being denied IVF treatments. What is happening in our country? Working people, working women who are working 1 or 2 jobs, who can barely afford childcare as it is, have to travel to another state to get on a plane sitting next to strangers to go and get the health care she needs. Barely can afford to do it, and what you are putting her through is unconscionable. And the people of America have not, the majority of Americans believe in a woman's right to make decisions about her own body. And that is why in every state where this issue has been on the ballot, in red and blue states both, the people of America have voted for freedom.
Vice President Harris,
Excuse me, I
thank
have
you.
to respond. Another lie. It's another lie. I have been a leader on IVF, which is fertilization. The IVF, I have been a leader. In fact, when they got a very negative decision on IVF from the Alabama courts, I saw the people of Alabama and the legislature 2 days later voted it in. I've been a leader on it. They know that, and everybody else knows it. I have been a leader on fertilization, IVF. And the other thing, you should ask, will she allow abortion in the 8th month, 9th month, 7th month?
Come on.
Okay, would you do that? Why don't you ask her that question?
Why don't you answer
That's
the
problem.
question? Would you
because
veto?
under Roe v.
Answer the
Wade,
question. Would you veto?
you could do abortions in the 7th month, the 8th month, the 9th
That's
month,
not true.
and probably after birth. Just look at the governor, former governor of Virginia. The governor of Virginia said, we put the baby aside and then we determine what we want to do with the baby.
President Trump, thank you.
We're going to turn now to immigration and border security. We know it's an issue that's important to Republicans, Democrats, voters across the board in this country. Vice President Harris, you were tasked by President Biden with getting to the root causes of migration from Central America. We know that illegal border crossings reached a record high in the Biden administration. This past June, President Biden imposed tough new asylum restrictions. We know the numbers since then have dropped significantly. But my question to you tonight is, why did the administration wait until 6 months before the election to act? And would you have done anything differently from President Biden on this?
So I'm the only person on this stage who has prosecuted transnational criminal organizations for the trafficking of guns, drugs, and human beings. And let me say that the United States Congress, including some of the most conservative members of the United States Senate, came up with a border security bill, which I supported. And that bill would have put 1,500 more border agents on the border to help those folks who are working there right now overtime, trying to do their job. It would have allowed us to stem the flow of fentanyl coming into the United States. I know there are so many families watching tonight who have been personally affected by the surge of fentanyl in our country. That bill would have put more resources to allow us to prosecute transnational criminal organizations for trafficking in guns, drugs, and human beings. But you know what happened to that bill? Donald Trump got on the phone, called up some folks in Congress and said, kill the bill. And you know why? Because he'd prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And understand, this comes at a time where the people of our country actually need a leader who engages in solutions, who actually addresses the problems at hand. But what we have in the former president is someone who would prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And I'll tell you something, he's going to talk about immigration a lot tonight, even when it's not the subject that is being raised. And I'm going to actually do something really unusual, and I'm going to invite you to attend one of Donald Trump's rallies, because it's a really interesting thing to watch. You will see during the course of his rallies, he talks about fictional characters like Hannibal Lecter. He will talk about windmills cause cancer. And what you will also notice is that people start leaving his rallies early out of exhaustion and boredom. And I will tell you, the one thing you will not hear him talk about is you. You will not hear him talk about your needs, your dreams, and your desires. And I'll tell you, I believe you deserve a president who actually puts you first. And I pledge to you that I will.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump, on that point, I want to get your response.
Well, I would like to respond.
Let me just ask, though, why did you try to kill that bill, and successfully so? That would have put thousands of additional agents and officers on the border.
First, let me respond as to the
Please.
rallies. She said people start leaving. People don't go to her rallies. There's no reason to go. And the people that do go, she's bussing them in and paying them to be there, and then showing them in a different light. So she can't talk about that. People don't leave my rallies. We have the biggest rallies, the most incredible rallies in the history of politics. That's because people want to take their country back. Our country is being lost. We're a failing nation. And it happened 3.5 years ago. And what's going on here, you're going to end up in World War III, just to go into another subject. What they have done to our country by allowing these millions and millions of people to come into our country, and look at what's happening to the towns all over the United States. And a lot of towns don't want to talk. It's not going to be Aurora or Springfield. A lot of towns don't want to talk about it because they're so embarrassed by it. In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there. And this is what's happening in our country, and it's a shame. As far as rallies are concerned, as far as the reason they go is they like what I say. They want to bring our country back. They want to make America great again. It's a very simple phrase, make America great again. She's destroying this country, and if she becomes president, this country doesn't have a chance of success. Not only success, we'll end up being Venezuela on steroids.
I just want to clarify here. You bring up Springfield, Ohio, and ABC News did reach out to the city manager there. He told us there have been no credible reports of specific claims of pets being harmed, injured, or abused by individuals within the immigrant community.
Well, I've seen people on television.
Let me just say here, this is
the people on television say my dog was taken and used for food. So maybe he said that, and maybe that's a good thing to say for a city manager.
I'm not taking this from
but
television.
But the people on television saying their
manager.
dog was eaten by the people that went there.
Again, the Springfield city manager says there's no evidence of that. Vice President Harris, I'll let you respond to the rest of what you've heard.
You talk about extreme. This is, I think, one of the reasons why in this election, I actually have the endorsement of 200 Republicans who have formerly worked with President Bush, Mitt Romney, and John McCain, including the endorsement of former Vice President Dick Cheney and Congress member Liz Cheney. And if you want to really know the inside track on who the former president is, if he didn't make it clear already, just ask people who have worked with him. His former chief of staff, a 4-star general, has said he has contempt for the Constitution of the United States. His former national security advisor has said he is dangerous and unfit. His former Secretary of Defense has said the nation, the republic, would never survive another Trump term. And when we listen to this kind of rhetoric, when the issues that affect the American people are not being addressed, I think the choice is clear in this election.
President Trump, I'll give you a quick minute to respond
Yeah.
here.
Thank you. Because when I hear that, see, I'm a different kind of a person. I fired most of those people, not so graciously. They did bad things or a bad job. I fired them. They never fired one person. They didn't fire anybody having to do with Afghanistan and the Taliban and the 13 people who's were just killed, viciously and violently killed. And I got to know the parents and the family. They didn't fire. They should have fired all those generals, all those top people, because that was one of the most incompetently handled situations anybody has ever seen. So when somebody does a bad job, I fire him. And you take a guy like Esper, he was no good, I fired him. So he writes a book. Another one writes a book, because with me, they can write books. With nobody else can they? But they have done such a poor job, and they never fire anybody. Look at the economy. Look at the inflation. They didn't fire any of their economists. They have the same people. That's a good way not to have books written about you. But just to finish, I got more votes than any Republican in history by far. In fact, I got more votes than any president, sitting president in history by far.
Let me continue on immigration. It was what you wanted to talk about earlier. So let's get back to your deportation proposal that the vice president has reacted to as well. President Trump, you call this the largest domestic deportation operation in the history of our country. You say you would use the National Guard. You say if things get out of control, you'd have no problem using the U.S. military.
Police, yes.
You also said you would use local police. How would you deport 11 million undocumented immigrants? I know you believe that number is much higher. Take us through this. What does this look like? Will authorities be going door to door in this country?
Yeah, it is much higher because of them. They allowed criminals, many, many millions of criminals. They allowed terrorists. They allowed common street criminals. They allowed people to come in, drug dealers, to come into our country. And they're now in the United States and told by their countries like Venezuela, don't ever come back or we're going to kill you. Do you know that crime in Venezuela and crime in countries all over the world is way down? You know why? Because they've taken their criminals off the street and they've given them to her to put into our country. And this will be one of the greatest mistakes in history for them to allow. And I think they probably did it because they think they're going to get votes, but it's not worth it because they're destroying the fabric of our country by what they've done. There's never been anything done like this at all. They've destroyed the fabric of our country. Millions of people let in, and all over the world, crime is down all over the world except here. Crime here is up and through the roof. Despite their fraudulent statements that they made, crime in this country is through the roof. And we have a new form of crime. It's called migrant crime. And it's happening at levels that nobody thought possible.
President Trump, as you know, the FBI says overall violent crime is actually coming down in this country. But
excuse me, the FBI they were defrauding statements. They didn't include the worst cities. They didn't include the cities with the worst crime. It was a fraud. Just like their number of 818,000 jobs that they said they created turned out to be a fraud.
President Trump, thank you. I'll let you respond, Vice President Harris.
Well, I think this is so rich coming from someone who has been prosecuted for national security crimes, economic crimes, election interference, has been found liable for sexual assault, and his next big court appearance is in November at his own criminal sentencing. And let's be clear where each person stands on the issue of what is important about respect for the rule of law and respect for law enforcement. The former vice president called for defunding federal law enforcement, 45,000 agents, get this, on the day after he was arraigned on 34 felony counts. So let's talk about what is important in this race. It is important that we move forward, that we turn the page on this same old tired rhetoric and address the needs of the American people, address what we need to do about the housing shortage, which I have a plan for, address what we must do to support our small businesses, address bringing down the price of groceries. But frankly, the American people are exhausted with this same old tired playbook.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
Excuse me. Every one of those cases was started by them against their political opponent. And I'm winning most of them, and I will win the rest on appeal. And you saw that with the decision that came down just recently from the Supreme Court. I'm winning most of them. But those are cases, it's called weaponization. Never happened in this country. They weaponized the Justice Department. Every one of those cases was involved with the DOJ, from Atlanta and Fani Willis to the Attorney General of New York and the DA in New York. Every one of those cases. And then they say, oh, he's a criminal. They're the ones that made them go after me. By the way, Joe Biden was found essentially guilty on the documents case. And what happened in my documents case? They said, oh, that's the toughest of them all. A complete and total victory. 2 months ago, it was thrown out. It's weaponization, and they used it, and it's never happened in this country. They used it to try and win an election. They're fake cases.
President Trump, thank you. A really quick response here, Vice President Harris, on this notion of weaponization of the Justice Department.
Well, let's talk about extreme and understand the context in which this election in 2024 is taking place. The United States Supreme Court recently ruled that the former president would essentially be immune from any misconduct if he were to enter the White House again. Understand, this is someone who has openly said he would terminate, I'm quoting, terminate the Constitution of the United States, that he would weaponize the Department of Justice against his political enemies. Someone who has openly expressed disdain for members of our military. Understand what it would mean if Donald Trump were back in the White House with no guardrails, because certainly we know now the court won't stop him. We know J.D. Vance is not going to stop him. It's up to the American people.
Vice President
stop
Harris,
him.
Thank you. Lindsay?
Vice President Harris, in your last run for president.
This is the one that weaponized, not me. She weaponized. I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me. They talk about democracy. I'm a threat to democracy. They're the threat to democracy with a fake Russia investigation
We do have a lot
that went nowhere.
We have a lot to get to. Lindsay?
Vice President Harris, in your last run for president, you said you wanted to ban fracking. Now you don't. You wanted mandatory government buyback programs for assault weapons. Now your campaign says you don't. You supported decriminalizing border crossings. Now you're taking a harder line. I know you say that your values have not changed. So then why have so many of your policy positions changed?
So my values have not changed, and I'm going to discuss every one of at least every point that you've made. But in particular, let's talk about fracking, because we're here in Pennsylvania. I made that very clear in 2020. I will not ban fracking. I have not banned fracking as Vice President of the United States. And in fact, I was the tie-breaking vote on the Inflation Reduction Act, which opened new leases for fracking. My position is that we have got to invest in diverse sources of energy so we reduce our reliance on foreign oil. We have had the largest increase in domestic oil production in history because of an approach that recognizes that we cannot over-rely on foreign oil. As it relates to my values, let me tell you, I grew up a middle-class kid raised by a hardworking mother who worked and saved and was able to buy our first home when I was a teenager. The values I bring to the importance of home ownership, knowing not everybody got handed $400 million on a silver platter and then filed bankruptcy 6 times, is a value that I bring to my work, to say we are going to work with the private sector and home builders to increase 3 million homes, increase by 3 million homes by the end of my first term. My work that is related to having a friend when I was in high school who was sexually assaulted by her stepfather. And my focus then on protecting women and children from violent crime is based on a value that is deeply grounded in the importance of standing up for those who are most vulnerable. My work that is about protecting Social Security and Medicare is based on longstanding work that I have done, protecting seniors from scams. My values have not changed. And what is important is that there is a president who actually brings values and a perspective that is about lifting people up and not beating people down. And name calling. The true measure of the leader is the leader who actually understands the strength is not in beating people down, it's in lifting people up. I intend to be that president.
President Trump, your
Well,
response?
first of all, I wasn't given $400 million. I wish I was. My father was a Brooklyn builder, Brooklyn, Queens, and a great father, and I learned a lot from him. But I was given a fraction of that, a tiny fraction, and I built it into many, many billions of dollars, many, many billions. And when people see it, they are even surprised. So we don't have to talk about that. Fracking, she's been against it for 12 years. Defund the police, she's been against that forever. She gave all that stuff up very wrongly, very horribly, and everybody's laughing at it, okay? They're all laughing at it. She gave up at least 12 and probably 14 or 15 different policies. Like, she was big on defund the police. In Minnesota, she went out, wait a minute, I'm talking now, if you don't mind, please. Does that sound familiar? She went out in Minnesota and wanted to let criminals that killed people, that burned down Minneapolis, she went out and raised money to get them out of jail. She did things that nobody would ever think of. Now she wants to do transgender operations on illegal aliens that are in prison. This is a radical left liberal that would do this. She wants to confiscate your guns, and she will never allow fracking in Pennsylvania. If she won the election, fracking in Pennsylvania will end on day one. Just to finish, one thing so important in my opinion. So I got the oil business going like nobody has ever done before. When they took over, they got rid of it, started getting rid of it, and the prices were going up the roof. They immediately let these guys go to where they were. I would have been 5 times, 4 times, 5 times higher, because you're talking about 3.5 years ago. They got it up to where I was because they had no choice, because the prices of energy were quadrupling and doubling. You saw what happened to gasoline. So they said, let's go back to Trump. But if she won the election, the day after that election, they'll go back to destroying our country, and oil will be dead. Fossil fuel will be dead. We'll go back to windmills, and we'll go back to solar, where they need a whole desert to get some energy to come out. You ever see a solar plant? By the way, I'm a big fan of solar, but they take 400, 500 acres of desert
President
soil.
Trump, we have a
These
lot
are
of
not good
issues
things
that
for
we
the
have to get to.
environment that
We're
she
out of time.
understands.
Thank you.
Lindsay, thank you. We have an election in just 56 days. And I want to talk about the peaceful transfer of power, which, of course, we all know is a cornerstone of our democracy, and the role of a president in a moment of crisis. Mr. President, on January 6th, you told your supporters to march to the Capitol. You said you would be right there with them. The country and the world saw what played out at the Capitol that day, the officers coming under attack. Aides in the West Wing say you watched it unfold on television off the Oval Office. You did send out tweets, but it was more than 2 hours before you sent out that video message telling your supporters to go home. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day?
You just said a thing that isn't covered. Peacefully and patriotically, I said during my speech, not later on. Peacefully and patriotically. And nobody on the other side was killed. Ashley Babbitt was shot by an out-of-control police officer that should have never, ever shot her. It's a disgrace. But we didn't do this group of people that have been treated so badly. I ask, what about all the people that are pouring into our country and killing people that she allowed to pour in? She was the border czar. Remember that. She was the border czar. She doesn't want to be called the border czar because she's embarrassed by the border. In fact, she said at the beginning, well, I'm surprised you're not talking about the border yet. That's because she knows what a bad job they've done. What about those people? When are they going to be prosecuted? When are these people from countries all over the world, not just South America? They're coming in from all over the world, David, all over the world. And crime rates are down all over the world because of it.
But let me just ask you,
David, when are those people going to be prosecuted? When are the people that burned down Minneapolis going to be prosecuted? Or in Seattle? They went into Seattle. They took over a big percentage of the city of Seattle. When are those people going to be prosecuted?
But let me just ask
you. You might ask her that question.
You were the president. You were watching it unfold on television. It's a very simple question as we move forward toward another election. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day? Yes or
I
no?
had nothing to do with that other than they asked me to make a speech. I showed up for a speech. I said, I think it's going to be big. I went to Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington, D.C., and the mayor put it back in writing, as you know. I said, you know, this is going to be a very big rally or whatever you want to call it. And again, it wasn't done by me. It was done by others. I said, I'd like to give you 10,000 National Guard or soldiers. They rejected me. Nancy Pelosi rejected me. It was just 2 weeks ago. Her daughter has a tape of her saying she is fully responsible for what happened. They want to get rid of that tape. It would have never happened if Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington did their jobs. I wasn't responsible for security. Nancy Pelosi was responsible. She didn't do her job.
The question was about you as president, not about former Speaker Pelosi, but I do want Vice President Harris to respond here.
I was at the Capitol on January 6th. I was the vice president-elect. I was also an acting senator. I was there. And on that day, the President of the United States incited a violent mob to attack our nation's capital, to desecrate our nation's capital. On that day, 140 law enforcement officers were injured, and some died. And understand, the former president has been indicted and impeached for exactly that reason. But this is not an isolated situation. Let's remember Charlottesville, where there was a mob of people carrying tiki torches, spewing anti-Semitic hate. And what did the president then at the time say? There were fine people on each side. Let's remember that when it came to the Proud Boys, a militia, the president said, the former president said, stand back and stand by. So for everyone watching who remembers what January 6th was, I say, we don't have to go back. Let's not go back. We're not going back. It's time to turn the page. And if that was a bridge too far for you, well, there is a place in our campaign for you to stand for country, to stand for our democracy, to stand for rule of law, and to end the chaos, and to end the approach that is about attacking the foundations of our democracy because you don't like the outcome. And be clear on that point. Donald Trump, the candidate, has said in this election there will be a bloodbath if this and the outcome of this election is not to his liking. Let's turn the page on this. Let's not go back. Let's chart a course for the future and not go backwards to the past.
Let me just follow up here.
It was a different term, and it was a term that related to energy because they have destroyed our energy business. That was where bloodbath was. Also, on Charlottesville, that story has been, as you would say, debunked. Laura Ingraham, Sean Hannity, Jesse, all of these people, they covered it. If they go an extra sentence, they will see it was perfect. It was debunked in almost every newspaper, but they still bring it up, just like they bring 2025 up. They bring all of this stuff up. I ask you this, you talk about the Capitol. Why are we allowing these millions of people to come through on the southern border? How come she's not doing anything? And I'll tell you what I would do, and I would be very proud to do it. I would say we would both leave this debate right now. I'd like to see her go down to Washington, D.C. during this debate because we're wasting a lot of time. Go down to, because she's been so bad, it's so ridiculous. Go down to Washington, D.C. and let her sign a bill to close up the border because they have the right to do it. They don't need bills. They have the right to do it. The president of the United States, you'll get him out of bed. You'll wake him up at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Right. You'll say, come on down to the office. Let's sign a bill. If he signs a bill that the border is closed, all he has to do is say it to the Border Patrol, who are phenomenal. If they do that, the border is closed.
Mr.
Those
President,
people are killing many people, unlike J6.
We talked immigration here tonight. I do want to focus on this next issue to both of you because it really brings us this into focus, truth in these times that we're living in. Mr. President, for 3.5 years after you lost the 2020 election, you repeatedly falsely claimed that you won, many times saying you won in a landslide. In the past couple of weeks leading up to this debate, you have said, quote, you lost by a whisker, that you, quote, didn't quite make it, that you came up a little bit short.
I said that?
Are you now acknowledging that you lost in 2020?
No, I don't acknowledge that at all.
But
I
you
said
did
that
say
sarcastically.
But
You know that. It was said, oh, we lost by a whisker. That was said sarcastically. Look, there's so much proof. All you have to do is look at it. And they should have sent it back to the legislatures for approval. I got almost 75 million votes, the most votes any sitting president has ever gotten. I was told if I got 63, which was what I got in 2016, you can't be beaten. The election, people should never be thinking about an election as fraudulent. We need two things. We need walls. And we have to have it. We have to have borders, and we have to have good elections. Our elections are bad. And a lot of these illegal immigrants coming in, they're trying to get them to vote. They can't even speak English. They don't even know what country they're in practically. And these people are trying to get them to vote. And that's why they're allowing them to come into our country.
I did watch all of these pieces of video. I didn't detect the sarcasm, lost by a whisker. We didn't quite make it. And we should just point out here as clarification, and you know this, you and your allies, 60 cases in front of many judges, many of them
no
Republican.
Judge looked at it.
And said
they said we didn't have standing. That's the other thing. They said we didn't have standing, a technicality. Can you imagine a system where a person in an election doesn't have standing? The president of the United States doesn't have standing. That's how we lost. If you look at the facts, and I'd love to have you'll do a special on it. I'll show you Georgia, and I'll show you Wisconsin, and I'll show you Pennsylvania, and I'll show you. We have so many facts and statistics, but you know what? That doesn't matter, because we have to solve the problem that we have right now. That's old news. And the problem that we have right now is we have a nation in decline, and they have put it into decline. We have a nation that is dying, David.
Mr. President, thank you. Vice President Harris, you heard the president there tonight. He said he didn't say that he lost by a whisker. So he still believes he did not lose the election that was won by President Biden and yourself. But I do want to ask you about something that's come up in the last couple of days. This was a post from President Trump about this upcoming election just weeks away. He said, when I win, those people who cheated, and then he lists donors, voters, election officials, he says will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, which will include long-term prison sentences. One of your campaign's top lawyers responded saying, we won't let Donald Trump intimidate us. We won't let him suppress the vote. Is that what you believe he's trying to do here?
Donald Trump was fired by 81 million people. So let's be clear about that. And clearly he is having a very difficult time processing that. But we cannot afford to have a president of the United States who attempts, as he did in the past, to upend the will of the voters in a free and fair election. And I'm going to tell you that I have traveled the world as Vice President of the United States, and world leaders are laughing at Donald Trump. I have talked with military leaders, some of whom worked with you, and they say you're a disgrace. And when you then talk in this way in a presidential debate and deny what over and over again are court cases you have lost because you did in fact lose that election, it leads one to believe that perhaps we do not have in the candidate to my right the temperament or the ability to not be confused about fact. That's deeply troubling, and the American people deserve better.
I'll give you 1 minute to respond, Mr. President.
Let me just say about world leaders. Viktor Orban, one of the most respected men, they call him a strong man. He's a tough person, smart, Prime Minister of Hungary. They said, why is the whole world blowing up? 3 years ago, it wasn't. Why is it blowing up? He said, because you need Trump back as president. They were afraid of him. China was afraid, and I don't like to use the word afraid, but I'm just quoting him. China was afraid of him. North Korea was afraid of him. Look at what's going on with North Korea, by the way. He said Russia was afraid of him. I ended the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, and Biden put it back on day one, but he ended the XL pipeline. The XL pipeline in our country, he ended that, but he let the Russians build a pipeline going all over Europe and heading into Germany, the biggest pipeline in the world. Look, Viktor Orban said it. He said the most respected, most feared person is Donald Trump. We had no problems when Trump was president, but when this weak, pathetic man that you saw at a debate just a few months ago, that if he weren't in that debate, he'd be running instead of her. She got no votes. He got 14 million votes. What you did, you talk about a threat to democracy. He got 14 million votes, and they threw him out of office. And you know what? I'll give you a little secret. He hates her. He can't stand her. But he got 14 million votes. They threw him out. She got 0 votes. And when she ran, she was the first one to leave because she failed. And now she's running. I don't understand it, but
Mr.
I'm
President,
okay with it
Mr.
because
President, your time is
I
up.
think we're
Thank
going to
you.
do very well.
We've got a lot more to get to.
Turning now
Yes.
to the Israel-Hamas war and the hostages who are still being held, Americans among them. Vice President Harris, in December, you said, quote, Israel has a right to defend itself, but you added, quote, it matters how, saying international humanitarian law must be respected. Israel must do more to protect innocent civilians. You said that 9 months ago. Now an estimated 40,000 Palestinians are dead. Nearly 100 hostages remain. Just last week, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said there's not a deal in the making. President Biden has not been able to break through the stalemate. How would you do it?
Well, let's understand how we got here. On October 7, Hamas, a terrorist organization, slaughtered 1,200 Israelis. Many of them young people who were simply attending a concert. Women were horribly raped. And so absolutely, I said then, I say now, Israel has a right to defend itself. We would. And how it does so matters, because it is also true, far too many innocent Palestinians have been killed. Children, mothers. What we know is that this war must end. It must end immediately, and the way it will end is we need a ceasefire deal and we need the hostages out. And so we will continue to work around the clock on that. Work around the clock, also understanding that we must chart a course for a two-state solution. And in that solution, there must be security for the Israeli people and Israel, and in equal measure for the Palestinians. But the one thing I will assure you always, I will always give Israel the ability to defend itself, in particular as it relates to Iran and any threat that Iran and its proxies pose to Israel. But we must have a two-state solution where we can rebuild Gaza, where the Palestinians have security, self-determination, and the dignity they so rightly deserve.
President Trump, how would you negotiate with Netanyahu and also Hamas in order to get the hostages out and prevent the killing of more innocent civilians in Gaza?
If I were president, it would have never started. If I were president, Russia would have never, ever, I know Putin very well, he would have never, and there was no threat of it either, by the way, for 4 years, have gone into Ukraine and killed millions of people when you add it up, far worse than people understand what's going on over there. But when she mentions about Israel, all of a sudden, she hates Israel. She wouldn't even meet with Netanyahu when he went to Congress to make a very important speech. She refused to be there because she was at a sorority party of hers. She wanted to go to the sorority party. She hates Israel. If she's president, I believe that Israel will not exist within 2 years from now. And I've been pretty good at predictions, and I hope I'm wrong about that one. She hates Israel. At the same time, in her own way, she hates the Arab population because the whole place is going to get blown up. Arabs, Jewish people, Israel will be gone. It would have never happened. Iran was broke under Donald Trump. Now Iran has $300 billion because they took off all the sanctions that I had. Iran had no money for Hamas or Hezbollah or any of the 28 different spheres of terror. And they are spheres of terror, horrible terror. They had no money. It was a big story, and you know it. You covered it very well, actually. They had no money for terror. They were broke. Now they're a rich nation. And now what they're doing is they're spreading that money around. Look at what's happening with the Houthis and Yemen. Look at what's going on in the Middle East. This would have never happened. I will get that settled and fast, and I'll get the war with Ukraine and Russia ended. If I'm president-elect, I'll get it done before even becoming president.
Vice President Harris, he says you hate Israel.
That's absolutely not true. I have my entire career and life supported Israel and the Israeli people. He knows that. He's trying to, again, divide and distract from the reality, which is it is very well known that Donald Trump is weak and wrong on national security and foreign policy. It is well known that he admires dictators, wants to be a dictator on day one, according to himself. It is well known that he said of Putin that he can do whatever the hell he wants and go into Ukraine. It is well known that he said when Russia went into Ukraine, it was brilliant. It is well known he exchanged love letters with Kim Jong-un. And it is absolutely well known that these dictators and autocrats are rooting for you to be president again because they're so clear they can manipulate you with flattery and favors. And that is why so many military leaders who you have worked with have told me you are a disgrace. That is why we understand that we have to have a president who is not consistently weak and wrong on
Vice
national
President
security,
Harris.
including the importance of upholding and respecting in highest regard our military.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
They're the ones, and she's the one that caused it, that's weak on national security by allowing every nation last month for the year, 168 different countries sending people into our country. Their crime rates are way down. Putin endorsed her last week, said, I hope she wins. And I think he meant it because what he's gotten away with is absolutely incredible. It wouldn't have happened with me. The leaders of other countries think that they're weak and incompetent, and they are. They're grossly incompetent. And I just ask one question. Why does Biden go in and kill the Keystone Pipeline and approve the single biggest deal that Russia's ever made, Nord Stream 2, the biggest pipeline anywhere in the world going to Germany and all over Europe? Because they're weak and they're ineffective. And Biden, by the way,
President
gets paid
Trump,
a lot of money.
Thank you. We have a lot of issues to get to.
We'll be right back with much more of this historic ABC News presidential debate from the National Constitution Center right here in Philadelphia. Back in a moment.
Your mic is off.
Peace, family. It's your brother Marc Lamont Hill. We are taking a quick break. Not our break, but the network's break from the debate between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. It started off, as I expected, a little slow, but it got spicier and spicier and spicier. It is an interesting conversation to be had, and we will be having it at the end. But so far, I just want to say this has gone in several interesting directions. Obviously, challenging each other's statements, each other's inconsistencies, contradictions. There has been live fact checking for sure, although most of it seems to be toward Donald Trump. It would be interesting to see what the live fact checking would look like if also Kamala Harris were pressed on certain statements. Also, it's interesting to see when they're pressed to answer a question yes or no, neither seems to do that. Donald Trump absolutely would not answer that question about the federal abortion ban. Kamala Harris wasn't asked a yes or no question, but she was asked to sort of explain the radical shift in her policy positions. And, you know, she took the out that the moderator gave her by saying, you know, my values haven't changed. And then she veered hard left. Or right or whatever, you know. She's done an excellent job of baiting Donald Trump, whether it's talking about his crowd sizes or whether it's talking about how world leaders see him. He's moved away from his strongest positions and chased her down a rabbit hole while she looks at him like a crazy person, because by the second half of their exchange, Donald Trump was looking increasingly unhinged. It was quite a sight to see. The question is, did Kamala Harris do anything to convince middle of the road voters or Trump voters, or did Donald Trump do anything to convince middle of the road or Harris supporters? That's the question here. Many people will go into this debate with their own perspectives, with their own points of view. And if you're a Trumper, Trump didn't do anything to dissuade you from that. If you are a Harris person, I'm not sure Trump did anything to change your opinion. So what I'm looking for in the second half here, and we'll talk about with our experts at the end, is did anyone make a compelling or persuasive position on the question of border policy, on the question of abortion, on the question of Israel-Palestine, which, as I tweeted, was the shortest segment. Why? Because there's no discernible difference between the two in lots of ways. It became who loves Israel more, which, if you're Kamala Harris, you've been framed as a Marxist anti-Semite who wants to quote Donald Trump, transgender operations on illegal aliens who are in prison, like that's a tough one, you know. So we'll be covering all of that. We'll get to the bottom of it. Right now, if I were scoring this on points, I would have Kamala Harris up. If you would have asked me that at the beginning, I would not have said that. It looked like he started off strong, hitting his points, but it was in the rebuttals that Kamala Harris so far has been stronger. It's in the rebuttals that she's been able to press him, and again get him rather out of his comfort zones and his safety spots, and lured him over to her safety spots and comfort zones. Again, by talking about crowd size, by talking about the perception of world leaders, by talking about his criminal cases, by talking about his financial situation. Whenever you say anything that does not stoke his ego, and God forbid, challenges his ego, Donald Trump will chase you down the rabbit hole. And against Joe Biden, he didn't have to display any discipline because Joe Biden was asleep. But now he's got to do something different. Anyway, it looks like we're about to return to the debate. Kamala Harris, Donald Trump, 2024. What a spectacle. What a sight. I cannot wait to talk about this with y'all. I got Diante Johnson here. I got David Johns here. I got Tiffany Loftin here. The three of us are going to talk and break this down. Let's
defend Ukraine from Russia, from Vladimir Putin, to defend their sovereignty, their democracy, that it's in America's best interest to do so, arguing that if Putin wins, he may be emboldened to move even further into other countries. You have said you would solve this war in 24 hours. You said so just before the break tonight. How exactly would you do that? And I want to ask you a very simple question tonight. Do you want Ukraine to win this war?
I want the war to stop. I want to save lives that are being uselessly, people being killed by the millions. It's the millions. It's so much worse than the numbers that you're getting, which are fake numbers. Look, we're in for 250 billion or more because they don't ask Europe, which is a much bigger beneficiary to getting this thing done than we are. They're in for $150 billion less because Biden and you don't have the courage to ask Europe like I did with NATO. They paid billions and billions, hundreds of billions of dollars when I said, either you pay up or we're not going to protect you anymore. So that's maybe one of the reasons they don't like me as much as they like weak people. But you take a look at what's happening. We're in for 250 to 275 billion. They're into 100 to 150. They should be forced to equalize. With that being said, I want to get the war settled. I know Zelensky very well, and I know Putin very well. I have a good relationship, and they respect your president, okay? They respect me. They don't respect Biden. How would you respect him? Why? For what reason? He hasn't even made a phone call in 2 years to Putin, hasn't spoken to anybody. They don't even try and get it. That is a war that's dying to be settled. I will get it settled before I even become president. If I win, when I'm president-elect, and what I'll do is I'll speak to one, I'll speak to the other, I'll get them together. That war would have never happened. And in fact, when I saw Putin after I left, unfortunately left because our country has gone to hell. But after I left, when I saw him building up soldiers, he did it after I left. I said, oh, he must be negotiating. It must be a good, strong point of negotiation. Well, it wasn't, because Biden had no idea how to talk to him. He had no idea how to stop it. And now you have millions of people dead, and it's only getting worse, and it could lead to World War III. Don't kid yourself, David. We're playing with World War III, and we have a president that we don't even know if he's. Where is our president? We don't even know if he's a president.
And just to clarify
they
here,
threw him out of a campaign like a dog. We don't even know. Is he our president? But we have a president,
Mr. President,
that doesn't know he's alive.
your time is up. Just to clarify in the question, Do you believe it's in the U.S. best interest for Ukraine to win this war? Yes or no?
I think it's the U.S. best interest to get this war finished and just get it done.
All right.
Negotiate a deal, because we have to stop all of these human lives from being destroyed.
I want to take this to Vice President Harris. I want to get your thoughts on support for Ukraine in this moment, but also as Commander-in-Chief, if elected, how would you deal with Vladimir Putin, and would it be any different from what we're seeing from President Biden?
Well, first of all, it's important to remind the former president, you're not running against Joe Biden, you're running against me. I believe the reason that Donald Trump says that this war would be over within 24 hours is because he would just give it up. And that's not who we are as Americans. Let's understand what happened here. I actually met with Zelensky a few days before Russia invaded, tried through force to change territorial boundaries, to defy one of the most important international rules and norms, which is the importance of sovereignty and territorial integrity. And I met with President Zelensky. I shared with him American intelligence about how he could defend himself. Days later, I went to NATO's eastern flank, to Poland and Romania. And through the work that I and others did, we brought 50 countries together to support Ukraine in its righteous defense. And because of our support, because of the air defense, the ammunition, the artillery, the javelins, the Abrams tanks that we have provided, Ukraine stands as an independent and free country. If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now. And understand what that would mean, because Putin's agenda is not just about Ukraine. Understand why the European allies and our NATO allies are so thankful that you are no longer president, and that we understand the importance of the greatest military alliance the world has ever known, which is NATO, and what we have done to preserve the ability of Zelensky and the Ukrainians to fight for their independence. Otherwise, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv with his eyes on the rest of Europe, starting with Poland. And why don't you tell the 800,000 Polish Americans right here in Pennsylvania how quickly you would give up for the sake of favor and what you think is a friendship with what is known to be a dictator who would eat you for lunch.
Vice President Harris, thank you. We've heard from both of you on Ukraine tonight. Afghanistan came up in the last hour. I wanted her to respond to something you said earlier, and please, I'll give you a minute here.
Putin would be sitting in Moscow, and he wouldn't have lost 300,000 men and women, but he would have been sitting in Moscow. Quiet, please. He would have been sitting in Moscow, much happier than he is right now. But eventually, you know, he's got a thing that other people don't have. He's got nuclear weapons. They don't ever talk about that. He's got nuclear weapons. Nobody ever thinks about that. And eventually, maybe he'll use them, and maybe he hasn't been that threatening, but he does have that. Something we don't even like to talk about. Nobody likes to talk about it. But just so you understand, they sent her to negotiate peace before this war started. 3 days later, he went in and he started the war, because everything they said was weak and stupid. They said the wrong things. That war should have never started. She was the emissary. They sent her in to negotiate with Zelensky and Putin, and she did. And the war started 3 days later. And that's the kind of talent we have with her. She's worse than Biden. In my opinion, I think he's the worst president in the history of our country. She goes down as the worst vice president in the history of our country. But let me tell you something. She is a horrible negotiator. They sent her in to negotiate. As soon as they left, Putin did the invasion.
President Trump, thank you. You did bring up something. You said she went to negotiate with Vladimir Putin. Vice President Harris, have you ever met Vladimir Putin? Can you clarify tonight?
Yet again, I said it at the beginning of this debate, you're going to hear a bunch of lies coming from this fellow. And that is another one. When I went to meet with President Zelensky, I've now met with him over 5 times. The reality is it has been about standing as America always should, as a leader upholding international rules and norms, as a leader who shows strength, understanding that the alliances we have around the world are dependent on our ability to look out for our friends and not favor our enemies because you adore strongmen instead of caring about democracy. And that is very much what is at stake here. The President of the United States is commander-in-chief. And the American people have a right to rely on a president who understands the significance of America's role and responsibility in terms of ensuring that there is stability and ensuring we stand up for our principles and not sell them for the benefit of personal flattery.
We've talked about Ukraine and Vladimir Putin. I do want to talk about Afghanistan. It came up in the first hour of this debate. I want to move on to Afghanistan.
Stoltenberg said Trump did the most amazing thing I've ever seen. He got these countries, the 28 countries at the time, to pay up. He said, I've never seen, he's the head of NATO. He said, I've never seen. For years, we were paying almost all of NATO. We were being ripped off by European nations, both on trade and on NATO. I got them to pay up by saying one of the statements you made before, if you don't pay, we're not going to protect you.
President
Otherwise,
Trump.
we would have never gotten it. He said it was one of the most incredible jobs that he's ever seen done.
Thank you. I want to turn to Afghanistan. It came up in the first hour of the debate, and we witnessed a poignant moment today on Capitol Hill, honoring the soldiers who died in the chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan. I do want to ask the Vice President, do you believe you bear any responsibility in the way that withdrawal played out?
Well, I will tell you, I agreed with President Biden's decision to pull out of Afghanistan. 4 presidents said they would, and Joe Biden did. And as a result, America's taxpayers are not paying the $300 million a day we were paying for that endless war. And as of today, there is not one member of the United States military who is in active duty in a combat zone in any war zone around the world, the first time this century. But let's understand how we got to where we are. Donald Trump, when he was president, negotiated one of the weakest deals you can imagine. He calls himself a deal maker. Even his national security advisor said it was a weak, terrible deal. And here's how it went down. He bypassed the Afghan government. He negotiated directly with a terrorist organization called the Taliban. The negotiation involved the Taliban getting 5,000 Taliban terrorists released. And get this, and the president at the time invited the Taliban to Camp David, a place of storied significance for us as Americans, a place where we honor the importance of American diplomacy, where we invite and receive respected world leaders. And this former president, as president, invited them to Camp David because he does not, again, appreciate the role and responsibility of the President of the United States to be commander-in-chief with a level of respect. And this gets back to the point of how he has consistently disparaged and demeaned members of our military, fallen soldiers, and the work that we must do to uphold the strength and the respect of the United States of America around the world.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump, your response to her saying that you began the negotiations with the Taliban.
So if you take a look at that period of time, the Taliban was killing our soldiers, a lot of them, with snipers. And I got involved with the Taliban because the Taliban was doing the killing. That's the fighting force within Afghanistan. They don't bother doing that because, you know, they deal with the wrong people all the time. But I got involved. And Abdul is the head of the Taliban. He is still the head of the Taliban. And I told Abdul, don't do it anymore. You do it anymore, you're going to have problems. And he said, why do you send me a picture of my house? I said, you're going to have to figure that out, Abdul. And for 18 months, we had nobody killed. We did have an agreement negotiated by Mike Pompeo. It was a very good agreement. The reason it was good, it was we were getting out. We would have been out faster than them, but we wouldn't have lost the soldiers. We wouldn't have left many Americans behind, and we wouldn't have left $85 billion worth of brand new, beautiful military equipment behind. And just to finish, they blew it. The agreement said you have to do this, and they didn't do it. They didn't do it. The agreement was terminated by us because they didn't do what they were supposed to do.
I want to move on.
And these people did the worst withdrawal, and in my opinion, the most embarrassing moment in the history of our country. And by the way, that's why Russia attacked Ukraine, because they saw how incompetent she and her boss are.
President Trump, thank you. I want to move on now to race and politics in this country. Mr. President, you recently said of Vice President Harris, quote, "I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black." I want to ask a bigger picture question here tonight. Why do you believe it's appropriate to weigh in on the racial identity of your opponent?
I don't, and I don't care. I don't care what she is. I don't care. You make a big deal out of something. I couldn't care less. Whatever she wants to be is okay with me.
But those were your words. So I'm
I
asking.
don't know. I don't know. I mean, all I can say is I read where she was not black, that she put out, and I'll say that. And then I read that she was black, and that's okay. Either one was okay with me. That's up to her. That's up to her.
Vice President Harris, your thoughts on this?
I think it's, I mean, honestly, I think it's a tragedy that we have someone who wants to be president who has consistently, over the course of his career, attempted to use race to divide the American people. You know, I do believe that the vast majority of us know that we have so much more in common than what separates us, and we don't want this kind of approach that is just constantly trying to divide us, and especially by race. And let's remember how Donald Trump started. He was a land, he owned buildings, and he was investigated because he refused to rent property to black families. Let's remember, this is the same individual who took out a full-page ad in the New York Times calling for the execution of 5 young Black and Latino boys who were innocent, the Central Park 5. Took out a full-page ad calling for their execution. This is the same individual who spread birther lies about the first Black president of the United States. And I think the American people want better than that, want better than this, want someone who understands, as I do, I travel our country. We see in each other a friend. We see in each other a neighbor. We don't want a leader who is constantly trying to have Americans point their fingers at each other. I meet with people all the time who tell me, can we please just have discourse about how we're going to invest in the aspirations and the ambitions and the dreams of the American people? Knowing that regardless of people's color or the language their grandmother speaks, we all have the same dreams and aspirations and want a president who invests in those, not in hate and division.
Vice President Harris, thank you. Lindsay?
President Trump, this is now your third time.
This is the most divisive presidency in the history of our country. There's never been anything like it. They're destroying our country, and they come up with things like what she just said. Going back many, many years, when a lot of people, including Mayor Bloomberg, agreed with me on the Central Park 5, they admitted, they said, they pled guilty. And I said, well, if they pled guilty, they badly hurt a person, killed a person ultimately. And if they pled guilty, then they pled, we're not guilty. But this is a person that has to stretch back years, 40, 50 years ago, because there's nothing now. I built one of the greatest economies in the history of the world, and I'm going to build it again. It's going to be bigger, better, and stronger. But they're destroying our economy. They have no idea what a good economy is. Their oil policies, every single policy. And remember this, she is Biden. You know, she's trying to get away from Biden. I don't know the gentleman, she says. She is Biden. The worst inflation we've ever had, a horrible economy because inflation has made it so bad, and she can't get away with that.
Thank you. Your time is up, Lindsay.
I want to respond to that, though. I want to just respond briefly. Clearly, I am not Joe Biden, and I am certainly not Donald Trump. And what I do offer is a new generation of leadership for our country, one who believes in what is possible, one who brings a sense of optimism about what we can do instead of always disparaging the American people. I believe in what we can do to strengthen our small businesses, which is why I have a plan. Let's talk about our plans and let's compare the plans. I have a plan to give startup businesses $50,000 tax deduction, to pursue their ambitions, their innovation, their ideas, their hard work. I have a plan, $6,000 for young families for the first year of your child's life to help you in that most critical stage of your child's development. I have a plan that is about allowing people to be able to pursue what has been fleeting in terms of the American dream by offering a help with down payment of $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time home buyers. That's the kind of conversation, I believe, David, that people really want tonight, as opposed to a conversation that is constantly about belittling and name calling. Let's turn the page
Vice President
and move
Harris,
forward.
thank you. Let's turn to policy.
President
Let's
Trump,
turn back
we
to
have
policy.
to move on. President Trump.
Let's turn to policy,
She has
please.
a plan to defund the police. She has a plan to confiscate everybody's gun.
President Trump,
She
we
has
do
a
have to
plan
move
to
on to
not
other
allow
issues.
fracking in Pennsylvania or anywhere else.
Okay.
Thank you,
That's
Mr.
what her
President.
plan is until just recently.
I just need
Lindsay,
to
go ahead.
respond
President
because
Trump,
no, the
President
former
Trump.
president has said
No, I'm
something
sorry.
twice that I need to
No,
respond to.
I'm sorry.
I
We're
just
going
need
to
to
move on,
respond
Vice
one
President
time
Harris.
to what he has
President
said
Trump, this
multiple
is
times.
now your
Yes.
third time running for president. You have long vowed to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare. You have failed to accomplish that. You now say you're going to keep Obamacare, quote, unless we can do something much better.
Correct.
Last month, you said, quote, we're working on it. So tonight, 9 years after you first started running, do you have a plan, and can you tell us what it is?
Obamacare was lousy health care, always was. It's not very good today. And what I said, that if we come up with something, and we are working on things, we're going to do it and we're going to replace it. But remember this, I inherited Obamacare because Democrats wouldn't change it. They wouldn't vote for it. They were unanimous. They wouldn't vote to change it. If they would have done that, we would have had a much better plan than Obamacare. But the Democrats came up. They wouldn't vote for it. I had a choice to make when I was president. Do I save it and make it as good as it can be, never going to be great, or do I let it rot? And I felt I had an obligation, even though politically it would have been good to just let it rot and let it go away. I decided, and I told my people, the top people, and they're very good people. I have a lot of good people in that administration. We read about the bad ones. We had some real bad ones too, and so do they. They have really bad ones. The difference is they don't get rid of them. But let me just explain. I had a choice to make. Do I save it and make it as good as it can be, or do I let it rot? And I saved it. I did the right thing. But it's still never going to be great, and it's too expensive for people. And what we will do is we're looking at different plans. If we can come up with a plan that's going to cost our people, our population, less money and be better health care than Obamacare, then I would absolutely do it. But until then, I'd run it as good as it can be run.
So just a yes or no, you still do not have a plan.
I have concepts of a plan. I'm not president right now. But if we come up with something, I would only change it if we come up with something that's better and less expensive. And there are concepts and options we have to do that. And you'll be hearing about it in the not too distant future.
Vice President Harris, in 2017, you supported Bernie Sanders' proposal to do away with private insurance and create a government-run healthcare system. 2 years later, you proposed a plan that included a private insurance option. What is your plan today?
Well, first of all, I absolutely support, and over the last 4 years as vice president, private healthcare options. But what we need to do is maintain and grow the Affordable Care Act. But I'll get to that, Lindsay. I just need to respond to a previous point that the former president has made. I've made very clear my position on fracking. And then this business about taking everyone's guns away. Tim Walz and I are both gun owners. We're not taking anybody's guns away. So stop with the continuous lying about this stuff. As it relates to the Affordable Care Act, understand, just look at the history to know where people stand. When Donald Trump was president, 60 times he tried to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. 60 times. I was a senator at the time when I will never forget the early morning hours when it was up for a vote in the United States Senate. And the late, great John McCain, who you have disparaged as being, you don't like him, you said at the time, because he got caught. He was an American hero. The late, great John McCain, I will never forget that night, walked onto the Senate floor and said, no, you don't. No, you don't. No, you don't get rid of the Affordable Care Act. You have no plan. And what the Affordable Care Act has done is eliminate the ability of insurance companies to deny people with pre-existing conditions. I don't have to tell the people watching tonight, you remember what that was like? Remember when an insurance company could deny if a child had asthma, if someone was a breast cancer survivor, if a grandparent had diabetes? And thankfully, as I've been vice president and we over the last 4 years have strengthened the Affordable Care Act, we have allowed for the first time Medicare to negotiate drug prices on behalf of you, the American people. Donald Trump said he was going to allow Medicare to negotiate drug prices. He never did. We did. And now we have capped the cost of insulin at $35 a month. Since I've been vice president, we have capped the cost of prescription medication for seniors at $2,000 a year. And when I am president, we will do that for all people, understanding that the value I bring to this is that access to health care should be a right and not just a privilege of those who can afford it. And the plan has to be to strengthen the Affordable Care Act, not get rid of it.
Vice
Past is
President
prologue
Harris,
in
thank
terms
you.
of where Donald Trump stands on that.
I want to move to an issue
Well,
that's important for a
she
lot
made
of
a mistake. Number one, John McCain fought Obamacare for 10 years. But it wasn't only him. It were all of the Democrats that kept it going. And you know what? We can do much better than Obamacare, much less money. But she won't improve private insurance for people, private medical insurance. That's another thing she doesn't want to give.
President
People
Trump.
are paying privately for insurance that have worked hard and made money, and they want to have private. She wants everybody to be on government insurance where you wait 6 months for an operation that you need immediately.
President Trump, thank you. We have another issue that we'd like to get to that's important for a number of Americans, in particular younger voters, and that's climate change. President Trump, with regard to the environment, you say that we have to have clean air and clean water. Vice President Harris, you call climate change an existential threat. The question to you both tonight is, what would you do to fight climate change? And Vice President Harris, we'll start with you. 1 minute for you each.
Well, the former president had said that climate change is a hoax. And what we know is that it is very real. You ask anyone who lives in a state who has experienced these extreme weather occurrences, who now is either being denied home insurance or it's being jacked up. You ask anybody who has been the victim of what that means in terms of losing their home, having nowhere to go. We know that we can actually deal with this issue. The young people of America care deeply about this issue. And I am proud that as vice president over the last 4 years, we have invested $1 trillion in a clean energy economy, while we have also increased domestic gas production to historic levels. We have created over 800,000 new manufacturing jobs while I have been vice president. We have invested in clean energy to the point that we are opening up factories around the world. Donald Trump said he was going to create manufacturing jobs. He lost manufacturing jobs. And I'm also proud to have the endorsement of the United Auto Workers and Sean Fain, who also know that part of building a clean energy economy includes investing in American-made products, American automobiles. It includes growing what we can do around American manufacturing and opening up auto plants, not closing them like happened under Donald Trump.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
That didn't happen under Donald Trump. Let me just tell you, they lost 10,000 manufacturing jobs this last month. It's going, they're all leaving. They're building big auto plants in Mexico, in many cases owned by China. They're building these massive plants, and they think they're going to sell their cars into the United States because of these people. What they have given to China is unbelievable. But we're not going to let that. We'll put tariffs on those cars so they can't come into our country, because they will kill the United Auto Workers and any auto worker, whether it's in Detroit or South Carolina or any other place. What they've done to business and manufacturing in this country is horrible. We have nothing because they refuse. You know, Biden doesn't go after people because supposedly China paid him millions of dollars. He's afraid to do it. Between him and his son, they get all this money from Ukraine. They get all this money from all of these different countries. And then you wonder, why is he so loyal to this one, that one, Ukraine, China? Why is he? Why did he get $3.5 million from the mayor of Moscow's wife? Why did she pay him $3.5 million? This is a crooked administration, and they're selling our country down the tubes.
President Trump, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be right back with closing statements from both of our candidates. An historic night, this ABC News presidential debate from Philadelphia. Back in a moment.
ABC News presidential.
Mark, your mic is muted again.
I'm gonna get that mic right. Welcome back to Night School's special coverage of the Trump-Harris debates, or the Harris-Trump debates, whatever you want to call it. It's been spirited, and I want to take a second to take the temperature of some of our guests. I'm going to start this time around with Diante Johnson. He is a Trump surrogate. Mr. Johnson, good to see you. Welcome to the show. You've been watching this for the last hour and a half. What do you make of it?
You know, it's the same. You know, they both saying the same thing, the same old stories, and I agree. It's really the same old thing. I do think the debate is a waste of time. I think at this point, most Americans know where they stand on both candidates. Most Americans know whether they are voting for economy or whether they're voting for personality, and I think that's where we're at.
You said voting for personality or voting for, what was the other thing?
Voting for economy and policy or personality.
Gotcha. So in terms of the actual performance, who do you think is winning the debate? I know you're a Trump person, but there were Biden people last time who said, "Hey, Biden is my guy, but he's losing this debate." I know Trump's your guy. Who's winning this debate in your estimation?
Well, you know, it's really hard to tell. I'll be honest. It's hard to tell. The reason it's hard, and the reason it's hard to tell is, I mean, you have a 3-on-1 debate, whether we want to agree with it or not. We have a 3-on-1 debate, you know. But I do think Kamala is not winning or losing. But I don't think that she has really gained anything from this debate. I don't think either one has gained anything. But I really think Kamala needed to gain something from this debate, and the biggest thing that she needed to gain was, what are you going to do as president? Not defending what President Biden did, not going after what President Trump did, but what is Kamala Harris going to do for America? And how is Kamala Harris going to change inflation? How is Kamala Harris going to change the cost of food and grocery costs and what's happening at the border? And that's not what I saw. I saw her defending what the Biden administration has done. I saw her defending. I saw her going after what Trump has done, but I had not yet saw what is Kamala Harris going to do. And I think she's just, you know, and that's just
let me do this. But we only got. I want to get Tiffany Loftin in here before we go back to the debate. Yeah, I was watching you make your faces, and I know you're in a room full of people. You were at a debate watching. And I can imagine what the people are saying, but what do you make of what's happening?
So Mark, first of all, thank you for having me. Second of all, are we allowed to cuss on this channel? Is that okay?
You still can.
We can. Okay. I don't know what the fuck he was talking about just now. In terms of, we don't know who's winning. There's a lot to that needs to be proved in this moment. This is, for many, many, many voters across the nation, their first time watching Kamala Harris run for president. This is their very first time watching that. It's not a rally. It's not her being the vice president. This is it's not a keynote speech. This is an opportunity for her to present to voters right now what her policies are, where she stands on fracking, abortion, immigration, where she stands on education, where she stands on student debt, where she stands on Gaza and Palestine, which I did not like that answer that she gave. I didn't like her fracking answer. But this is her opportunity to tell us where she's at and how she differs from Joe Biden. We are clearly watching Kamala Harris win this election, win this debate, win this the different pings and arguments and questions that are being brought up. It is very clear that Donald Trump is under a lot of pressure. He's completely terrified. He is nervous. He's embarrassed. And he's also unable to come up with clear plans and explain to the voters how his thing is different from Kamala Harris.
We're gonna pause there. We're gonna bring David Johnson at the
gonna
end.
watch
and get back to the rest of this
Welcome
debate.
back
Stay
tonight.
with us,
The
y'all.
time has come for closing statements, and Vice President Harris, we begin with you.
So I think you've heard tonight two very different visions for our country. One that is focused on the future, and the other that is focused on the past, and an attempt to take us backward. But we're not going back. And I do believe that the American people know we all have so much more in common than what separates us. And we can chart a new way forward. And a vision of that includes having a plan, understanding the aspirations, the dreams, the hopes, the ambition of the American people, which is why I intend to create an opportunity economy, investing in small businesses, in new families, in what we can do around protecting seniors, what we can do that is about giving hardworking folks a break and bringing down the cost of living. I believe in what we can do together that is about sustaining America's standing in the world and ensuring that we have the respect that we so rightly deserve, including respecting our military and ensuring we have the most lethal fighting force in the world. I will be a president that will protect our fundamental rights and freedoms, including the right of a woman to make decisions about her own body and not have her government tell her what to do. I'll tell you, I started my career as a prosecutor. I was a DA, I was an attorney general, a United States senator, and now vice president. I've only had one client, the people. And I'll tell you, as a prosecutor, I never asked a victim or a witness, are you a Republican or a Democrat? The only thing I ever asked them, are you okay? And that's the kind of president we need right now. Someone who cares about you and is not putting themselves first. I intend to be a president for all Americans and focus on what we can do over the next 10 and 20 years to build back up our country by investing right now in you, the American people.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump?
So she just started by saying she's going to do this, she's going to do that, she's going to do all these wonderful things. Why hasn't she done it? She's been there for 3.5 years. They've had 3.5 years to fix the border. They've had 3.5 years to create jobs and all the things we talked about. Why hasn't she done it? She should leave right now, go down to that beautiful White House, go to the Capitol, get everyone together and do the things you want to do, but you haven't done it and you won't do it because you believe in things that the American people don't believe in. You believe in things like we're not going to frack. We're not going to take fossil fuel. We're not going to do things that are going to make this country strong, whether you like it or not. Germany tried that, and within 1 year, they were back to building normal energy plants. We're not ready for it. We can't sacrifice our country for the sake of bad vision. But I just ask one simple question. Why didn't she do it? We're a failing nation. We're a nation that's in serious decline. We're being laughed at all over the world. All over the world, they're laughed. I know the leaders very well. They're coming to see me. They call me. We're laughed at all over the world. They don't understand what happened to us as a nation. We're not a leader. We don't have any idea what's going on. We have wars going on in the Middle East. We have wars going on with Russia and Ukraine. We're going to end up in a third world war, and it'll be a war like no other because of nuclear weapons, the power of weaponry. I rebuilt our entire military. She gave a lot of it away to the Taliban. She gave it to Afghanistan. What these people have done to our country, and maybe toughest of all, is allowing millions of people to come into our country. Many of them are criminals, and they're destroying our country. The worst president, the worst vice president in the history of our country.
President Trump, thank you. And that is our ABC News presidential debate from here in Philadelphia at the National Constitution Center. I'm Lindsay Davis.
And I'm David Muir. Thank you for watching here in the U.S. and all over the world, and from all of us here at ABC News. Good night.
Welcome back to Night School on the Marc Lamont Hill official YouTube channel. We've been giving you special coverage of the debate between Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump. It has been a barn burner, as they say. It was incredibly interesting, engaging, frustrating, hilarious. It was all the things. But what we want to do here on the channel, like we always do, is not give you the traditional mainstream analysis. We want to break down what happened. We'll call balls and strikes, but we're also going to give you a real deep dive into what was said, what wasn't said, what should have been said, and what it all means. And so joining me to do all of this are three very special guests. I have with me David Johns. He is the CEO and Executive Director of the National Black Justice Coalition. I'm also joined by Tiffany Loftin. She is a national education and labor organizer. She's also the host of How We Get Free podcast. She was appointed by President Obama to serve on the White House initiative on educational excellence for African Americans in higher ed. And of course, David Johns also was a part of a significant Brothers Keeper initiative with President Obama as well. These are very accomplished and decorated Black folk. And of course, I'm also joined by Diante Johnson, who is the founder and president of the Black Conservative Federation. He's also a Trump surrogate. Thank you all for joining me. I'm happy to be here with y'all. I'm going to reiterate that we're going to give sophisticated analysis. We are going to respect each other. We are going to be civil. We can call each other out in challenges. We can even make them faces y'all all making. But what we're not going to do is disrespect each other. We're going to get right to it. Deontay, I feel like you might be a little outnumbered here, so I'm going to let you go first. I'm going to try to balance that out a little bit. We're going to have our own little version of the Electoral College here. By the way, just a sincere question, Deontay. I know you said you're the founder and president of the Black Conservative Federation. How many people are part of that?
So right now we have a staff of about 120, and we have a membership of about 8,000 currently.
Wow. Okay. So that means that you represent a sizable number of Black Republicans who are, if I'm reading you correctly, leaning toward Trump. When you watch the debate tonight, did Trump speak to the issues that you care about, and did he speak to them well?
You know, I think he definitely spoke to the issues that I care about. I think that a lot of Black Republicans care about. I think that he mentioned questions that a lot of independents have answered. I mean, who have asked. I don't think that this debate really changed anyone's opinion on whether they're supporting Donald Trump or they're supporting Kamala Harris. I think that, you know, with being 50 days out, Americans have really decided where they're at, and they decided who they're going to support. I think that Kamala Harris had the opportunity, like I said, to really give her a response on what she's going to do and truly separate herself from Joe Biden. But I believe that while trying to separate herself from Joe Biden, she was put on the hot seat to actually defend Joe Biden more than separate herself and talk about her own policy.
David, I'm going to bring you in for the first time. What do you make of that statement?
Which statement, to be more precise, my good frat brother?
The question about, or the point he just made about Kamala Harris being forced to defend Biden so much that she wasn't able to articulate her own kind of policy vision.
Yeah, I disagree. I think that if people were listening to the Vice President, Kamala Harris, Madam Vice President, that she articulated the position that she has based on policy. And I think that it would be a lazy response to suggest that that was all about President Biden in this moment, where she is clearly the candidate for presidency. And that distinction is not lost on me as somebody that understands that they were part of a party ticket together. And so what I will honor is that the Republican brother named something that I appreciate, which is that we're not listening to her position on the issues. What people are listening for are these dog whistles that many people in the media have trained people to expect in ways that would affirm what it is he's exactly saying. But for people who have witnessed the last 2 hours of this debate, we heard from Madam Vice President Kamala Harris articulate where she is on issues. And we should honor that that is her position and not the position of the current sitting president.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah. Tiffany, let's get to some of those issues. The question for me is always, who is the speech directed to. There's something called the mode of address, right? Who does this movie? Who does this film? Who does this newspaper article think you are? When I watch them talk, the mode of address seemed to be moderates, undecided people, and political moderates. Kamala Harris seemed to, and Donald Trump both attempted to speak to people who haven't made their mind up or who aren't so politically right-leaning or left-leaning that their decisions made up just depending on, who's running for office. And so when I hear Kamala Harris talk about border policy, when I hear Kamala Harris talk about fracking, when I hear Kamala Harris talk about Israel-Palestine, those are three issues right there where I was like, there's not a strongly distinguishable position, not just between her and Joe Biden, which would make sense, but between her and her Republican opponent. When you heard the debate, did you feel that Kamala Harris, and we'll get to Trump in a moment, do you feel that Kamala Harris was leaning toward the center or even to the right at times? And if so, why?
Let me first start by saying this because I came in here on fire. You had me answering questions in between the debate and the conversation, and I wanted to make it extremely clear that I disagree, which is why I cussed, because I heard your rules in the beginning of this match, and I want to be very clear about where I stand. Very clearly, when we're talking to your audience, Mark, and why I'm here, I want to make sure people that are listening are not being confused or told differently, that it was not clear who was winning and who was not winning this debate tonight, and that what we learned from this debate was worth our time, because it was. So I want to apologize to the brother. I don't want to call him Republican because I know he has a name. I just forgot what it was. But you are not my enemy, brother. You and I are not running for president. And if we was, I would win. But we're not running for president. And so you are not my enemy. And so I am naming that because me cussing was not to you personally. So I just wanted to name that.
Absolutely.
No offense taken. So good. I want to make sure, because Mark came out with the rules and I was like, I hope nobody was offended and talked about me backstage. So let me say this very clearly. Okay. I also I did theater for 8 years, Mark. So mode of addressing audiences is really important to me. That's a skill that I learned. In addition to those who are undecided and moderates, I also want to believe that she and him were talking to, well, maybe her, sorry. Vice President Kamala Harris was talking to people who might be Republican voters, and she was trying to skew or recruit them to her side. She said multiple times during her answers that there were people who were Republicans who did not support Donald Trump. She named how many Republicans did not like him, how many people he fired that did not support him, that came out and said he was a horrible boss, how many voters, how many congressional leaders did not support Donald Trump. And so I think she was also trying to skew some of them to say, listen, it's either him or me. And since you're not choosing him, you got to choose me. So that's answering your question. I just think that she was catering also to those type of people. I do think now on September 10th, with less than 56 days left, this is a really interesting strategy to try to find the people who are on both sides of the aisle. I'm going to be very honest. I said earlier, and I still believe Kamala Harris is going to win this election. However, Kamala Harris is not a radical person. She's not a radical president. She doesn't have radical policies. She did, however, today demonstrate for the very first time what her issues are. And I took a whole list of them. In addition to naming some of the things, when you asked me, I'm gonna wait. But in addition to naming some of the things that she didn't cover and talk about that I wanted her to talk about, and some positions that she took, and some positions that she took that I don't agree with. However, I am very clear that Donald Trump, this liar, this person who she's so wonderfully and so gracefully said, is still having a hard time processing the last election that he lost. I think that this person cannot be the president that we have in November for the next 4 years. And so people needed to make a distinction tonight between Kamala Harris and Joe Biden. And tonight, I think they actually got that.
Diante, would you agree with that? At the very least, that a distinction was made between the two? Kamala Harris certainly laid out what some of her issues were. Some people have argued in the chat here and on social media, and kind of some of the instant analysis, that she laid out her issues but didn't lay out her policies. Do you feel like you heard Kamala Harris's policies clearly? Did she distinguish herself from Donald Trump? I get you don't agree with her policies one way or the other, but did you at least hear the distinctions between the two?
So let me explain something. I like to be very fair when it comes to politics. I believe in our electoral system. So I actually like to sit and listen to both sides. Yes, I'm a Republican. Yes, I support President Trump. But before that, I'm a political scientist, and I really actually like to hear the policies and like to study how politics works. And I heard a lot of her defense points. She definitely clarified her fracking. She wanted to clarify her fracking stance, especially being in Pennsylvania. But I did not see anything different that separates her from Joe Biden. And that's hard because she was his vice president. So yes, they should be very similar. But to show the American people that what happened under the Biden administration will not happen under the Kamala Harris administration. That's what I did not see.
What's your question about that?
That's not the question, though. The question is Kamala Harris different from Donald Trump? Biden is not running. He is somewhere asleep in the bed.
No, I agree. I
watch
agree.
the replay tomorrow. But the question that we should be answering is Kamala different from Biden? It is Kamala different from Donald Trump? And the answer is yes.
That was the question. Do you feel like she distinguished herself from Trump?
I think Kamala and Donald Trump are definitely different. I mean, today's show that definitely, but that still hasn't shown, the debate has not shown voters that anything new. We knew coming into the debate that they were both different. We knew that in fairness, coming to the debate.
In fairness, the last time voters had to choose between Biden and Trump, they chose Biden. So you could make the case that even if she hasn't distinguished herself sufficiently from Biden, that isn't exactly a losing strategy. It's not like she's associating herself with John Kerry.
Correct.
Okay, so okay, fair enough. Okay, so let's get at some of these issues. One of the issues, again, we've just talked about fracking and we've talked about border policy. Two places where Kamala Harris, David Johns, does not have a particularly progressive political position. They asked her two questions. One, why have your positions changed on some of these issues? And two, have your values changed? It seemed to me that she answered the values question strongly and clearly. She said, my values haven't changed. I'm not sure she gave a clear answer on why the policies have changed. I'm not asking you to be her surrogate here, but help me make sense of it. Is this a case, as all candidates do, of I'm adjusting to win this election and we'll work the rest of it out later? Or do you think she's had a natural shift in these areas? How do you see Kamala Harris's sort of evolution in terms of policy?
Good brother, you asked two questions precisely, which is how do I explain the shift, and then how do I articulate the context around her positioning now? Yeah. I want to be clear in that I'm not going to speak to her shift or the process by which she's processed information. That's and fair. Is articulating where she is now with new information based on where she was when she articulated the position heretofore. My example is this: when she was in California, she certified gay marriages, and then the state of California said that what you did, we will nullify. So I just want to offer that it's difficult to do the best positioning with the information one has in hindsight dance. So I'm not going to play that game. What I will say is this, and this is my hot take, unpopular opinion. In this moment, honoring the question that I heard you ask our good brother, I think it's Diante, is that right? Is that your name, brother? Diante? Yes. Our good brother, Diante. Based on the policy positions, our vice president does not have to articulate a single thing more to me for me to understand that she is the choice in this moment to defend democracy, to advance anti-Black policies, to advance anti-LGBTQ policies, to ensure that I will not have to exist under the trauma associated with the Trump administration. And so there's a part of me that just wants to be clear, and I've done a lot of reflection upon this. I know it is not popular. She should not have to articulate a single thing for those who understand the importance of voting in defense of democracy, or Black people, or queer people more generally, to move forward. That's how I enter this conversation.
Ooh, we're going to disagree on that.
And we can, but that's where we are. I want to be pragmatic. So I want y'all to know how I enter this.
But is that pragmatic, though? And I'll tell you, here's why.
It is. We got an election in less than 60 days. So we can talk about, again, in a way that I appreciate. I love both of, I'm talking about to my friends I know in real life, you, Mark, and you, Tiffany. I love both of you. I love both of you up in your work. But in this moment, and I've said to Tiffany outside of this space, there's something I'm missing. Let me know. This is not about.
Let me tell you why I disagree.
He's been consistent about that. He's been consistent about it.
There's two reasons why I disagree. Obviously, I disagree on principle, right?
Sure.
But as a pragmatic reason, there are a lot of voters who disagree with you. There are a lot
but
of
also, but the reality is we have an election that is
but hear me out.
on a particular day.
Hear me
Mark,
out.
he said it was unpopular when he started his sentence.
But hear me out.
And it said it was unpopular, but let's go. We double dutch it.
But hear me out. Just hear me out. What I'm saying though is, even if I agree with you wholeheartedly and say, forget the issues, let's just win now and figure it out later. Let's say I took that position. I'm saying that there are so many voters who will not vote for her unless they hear a principled position on Israel.
So now let me just finish this part of it, which is that this is my frustration. So I understand righteous indignation around, we need to talk about a third party candidate. I understand people who are radical around genocide and will name Gaza. Maybe they'll name the Sudan. But what I also know is two things in this moment. We are not as critical of the Democratic Party as we are the Republican Party. What I know is that people who are righteous with all of their rage do not have the same questions in this moment around these issues, fracking, border policies, and military, as we do the Republican candidate. It is not the same. And in a world where I would love to, again, we got a dream, Afrofuturism, what is possible without the tainting of white supremacy? Let's talk about third-party possibilities. But in this moment, there is an election that is going to be certified on a particular date. And what I know is that we are past the uncommitted moment. So I said to, again, Tiffany, tell me if I'm out of line. But a previous conversation, I said to my sister, if I'm missing something, let me know. But if you decide I got it in the primary, I'm uncommitted in the primary, I need to hear her say this thing. I need to hear the party move in this way. The challenge is in this moment, pragmatically, is we are not in the primary, we're in the general. There's an election that's going to happen. If you don't vote for her,
that's still a normal play.
One more thing. You are effectively voting for him. And what I also know is, particularly around the border, around military, and around Palestine, we don't have the same energy for that nigga who we know is not about democracy or Black people generally. So I'm not willing to equivocate around if we have the same energy for her, we might get to a different place. I can disagree with her. I can argue with her. I cannot have a conversation with him. He does not want me to exist. And that for me is the line. It's not about a policy issue. I don't have the luxury of being a single voter issue. This for me is about pragmatism in the purest sense of the word.
I'm just saying, like, I'm looking right now at 3 states, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Arizona, where Jill Stein has 40% of Muslim voters in Michigan, compared to 12% who say they plan to vote for Harris. And in Michigan, that's not a small number. In Wisconsin, 44% compared to 39% for Harris. And in Arizona, 35 to 29. I'd yield. There's probably not that. I mean, there's more Muslims in Arizona than you might think, but it's probably not a number that will shift the needle. All I'm saying is that even if I take your position, and I likely will vote the same way you're going to vote for the same reason. But my point is, there are voters who will vote for her if she says something different tonight. There are voters who will say,
and there are voters who will not vote for her because she's going to say that thing.
100%.
It's in a lose-lose situation.
Let me bring Tiffany in and then Diante. Where I'm going is just how much of what I want to think through is how much of the calculation, Tiffany, do you think is her saying, look, this is where I am on fracking. I'm not as progressive as y'all are on fracking. Like you said, she's not a progressive person. I
said she's not a radical person.
I not a radical. You said radical. Forgive me. I would say she's not a progressive. I'd say she's a liberal. But without getting into the semantics,
and these terms don't matter. These terms don't matter to the niggas in the barbershop.
I'm with you.
The distinction between progressive and
my barbershop is sophisticated, David.
What I'll tell you, and I'm there tomorrow.
Here's what does matter in my barbershop.
But the distinction is not a difference.
Well, one at a time, y'all. Here's what matters in my barbershop. I will say, is reparations, a conversation on reparations, something we didn't talk about tonight, right? What does matter is, and I'm not saying it should or shouldn't, but there are a lot of people in my barbershop who care about her, how she talks about her own blackness, how she identifies.
Which she did not answer that question.
She didn't answer that question either.
But
I'm
without
not-
regard for
David, hold on, David. It's okay. Hold on.
I'm not saying she should or shouldn't. I'm simply talking
She should
about.
have.
I'm just saying, and Tiffany, I want to hear your response to this. Again, I'm not saying she shouldn't have to dignify it, but what I'm saying is at the end of the day, to David's point, she is making choices that are going to make some voters say yes and other voters say no. I'm wondering, I'm thinking how much of tonight was about that calculation, and how much of it was, this is just how I see things.
Well, this is the first time we have seen, again, I keep going back to this is the first time we have seen her, because it is the first time we've seen her in a debate as somebody running for president in a race against Donald Trump, not as a primary candidate. There were other issues, Mark, that I want to lift up. I did not hear anybody tonight talk about the cost of living in terms of rent, which is extremely, extremely high in every metropolitan city across the country, which is why exactly I moved from Los Angeles to Atlanta, because it's just a little bit cheaper. Folks did not talk about voting rights and talking about a little bit cheaper, but it is cheaper. Voting rights. They talked about how we need to protect democracy. And many of the folks that I organize with, whether that be workers in the labor movement or whether that be students on college campuses across the country, feel like our democracy right now is in shambles anyway, as it already exists. And we did not hear anybody else advance or thank you, baby K, the rent is too damn high. And so we didn't hear anybody else talk about how it is. And we didn't hear anybody else talk about how we need to advance voting rights and we need to protect voting rights and we need to expand voting and make universal voting. I think we didn't hear any radical policies in that nature. We didn't hear anything about education. There were some side conversations about student loan debt and people pointing fingers about who was going to get canceled and who wasn't going to get canceled. We heard no issues whatsoever about education, teachers, pay wages, whether it was gun violence. We just had a shooting last week here in Atlanta where 4 people were shot and killed and 9 people were injured. We did not hear anything about the death penalty by a white boy, thank you, but death penalty, reparations, or jobs at all. We heard about industrial jobs, and Sean Fain keeps getting a shout out, and I feel like one day the brother needs to run for president. UAW is really doing their thing because they're taking up a lot of space. I think Sean Fain should run for president.
Oh, I thought you said Sean King, and I was like, I had to hear you wrong. Go ahead.
She did not say that.
I said Sean Fain. I said Sean Fain, and I'm going to leave that there. We're never going to talk about Sean King, brother. Okay, whatever. So I'm Sean Fain.
It's your thing. I just didn't think that was coming out your mouth.
Well, I said Sean Fain, who is the president of the United Auto Workers. For those who don't know, UAW. I can't even. David, move. Okay, so and I needed to hear a different position on Palestine. And so there were issues that were missing. To your question, Mark, about whether or not the calculations were correct, I understand, David, what you are saying. 100%. I do. And I heard you when we was on the last call, and I heard you when we talked about it one-on-one. I understand what you are saying. I also believe, as an organizer, in multiple subjects of issues that affect people of color and communities of color and low-income people, that we need to continue to have people who are always demanding more and better. Yes, we have less than 60 days, but we have to continue to pull people in a direction so that Kamala Harris says the right thing eventually, or so that when we end up having a meeting with her, because she will take a meeting with us, unlike Donald Trump, that we will be able to have a disciplined and dignitary conversation with her to move her on our issues, hopefully. What was the quote? I was talking, I didn't read it.
Somebody just named me in the comment. Run that back so I can actually analyze it and respond to it.
Oh, shoot.
I want to be clear.
I'll bring it up for you.
Okay, let me finish what I'm saying. Bring it up. Oh, well, David about to cut somebody out in the comments, so I just need to pause. But anyway, so what happens is, and I got your back because they better not talk shit about you. But I want to be very clear that like the closing statements, we'll talk about the wait. Don't
Let's be
respond.
distracted by the comments, y'all. Keep rolling.
Wait a minute. Let me keep saying what I'm saying.
Okay,
I was very disappointed, Mark, to hear both closing statements talk so deeply and so proudly about enforcing and having the largest military of arms in the entire world and funding the military and being scared about weaponry and being scared about World War III and et cetera. I want to name that Donald Trump continued to lie on the stage tonight, and the moderators did a really great job of fact checking him. Ain't nobody eating no dogs nowhere, first of all, and ain't nobody killing babies after babies have been born. And Donald Trump did not acknowledge that and continued to come off the microphone and try to tell people he saw it on the television. This is not who needs to be the president, but I am naming that her calculations at this moment in this debate didn't need to be how many people am I going to win, because she still needs to do that in the next 60 days. This first debate was, is she different from Donald Trump, and can she be presidential, and does she have a plan, and does she have an agenda? And the answer to all of those questions is yes tonight.
Deontay, let me bring you in. By the way, y'all, if y'all see me drinking, it's because I'm thirsty.
USSA.
If you see me drinking from this glass, it's because I'm thirsty. If you see me from this one, it's because Dave is wearing me out. So it just depends on if it's this cup, it's we having problems. If it's this one, I'm just thirsty. Deontay, let me bring you in here. I want to ask you some Trump questions, but you
Catherine from New Jersey
have an opportunity to respond to what was previously stated. Again, I'm going to give you more time because there's fewer of you than others. I want to be fair. Go ahead.
So the first thing I want to say is, I mean, I responding to Kamala Harris doesn't have to respond or doesn't have to explain her policy, to explain her position. That's the most politically ignorant conversation I've ever heard, because
Bitch, you tried it. You fucking tried it.
This is
ignorant. No, you will not. Ignorant is a charged term, and you will not on this platform disrespect me as a person who said it. I have worked for this government. I have defended our country. You are out of fucking line. You Mr. Republican. You fucking grifter. You fucking tried it.
The second thing is
okay. I'm shutting this down for a second. We're gonna take a 30-second break. We're gonna have to have David's muted right now. Actually, we're not gonna take a break. David's muted right now. David, you're muted right now. They're not gonna hear you right now. We're going to.
He don't care that he's muted, baby. He gonna talk.
All right, so we're
going to disrespect David.
We're going to pause, and I really want us to have this conversation because I want to get into some substantive issues here. We're starting to get there. We're going to not engage in the ad hominems. We're not going to name call. We're not going to curse at each other. We're going to be respectful. Dave is right now either pointing to his degrees or Compton. I'm not sure which one. But let's pick up. We're gonna try one more time. Otherwise, the next person who uses profanity, we're gonna have to pull you out of the room. I want to have a good conversation.
We can't cuss, Mark. No cussing.
You know, we can. I mean, generally, when I say we can cuss, I mean like we can cuss like, damn, that shit was crazy, not like at each other.
Got it. Okay.
Not in a harmful way. And it's not just cussing. To David's point, we're not going to call each other ignorant. We're not going to call each other any of these things. I'm going to take a quick break. We're going to come back. I'm going to come back. We're going to take a quick break. We're all going to exhale, and then we're going to pick back up with no ad hominems, full civility, but deep analysis. I want to get to these points. I want to get to these issues. All right, y'all. We'll be right back. All right, y'all. I want to get to this analysis. Deontay, we're going to pick back up where you came from. We're all going to exhale. We're all going to have an analysis here. Deontay, you were saying.
So I think.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I think if we look at the political map, and when I have conversations with individuals on the left, and when I have conversations with moderates, is that we have to understand what's important to who. When we look at Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, North Carolina, Georgia, people are on the fence. They need to hear from both candidates on what it is that these candidates are supporting. And this is something that is not just an issue that we see amongst Democrats. We see it amongst Republicans all the time. I remember in the Republican primary, Ron DeSantis thought that he was going to run just because he was different than Donald Trump, but his policies were horrible. And so what you have to explain that. And I think that far too many times politicians run thinking, well, I don't have to explain this. I don't have to, everybody knows who I am. This person is more evil and I don't have to explain why. So I think that's really the issue that I see. but also when we look at, Tiffany, you mentioned a lot of the policy when it comes to rent, when it comes to utilities, when it comes to, and neither candidate mentioned it. Neither candidate mentioned what's happening when it comes to education. I know in Pennsylvania, education is a very critical issue. School choice and charter schools, that's a major issue in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, two targeted states. In Michigan, the UAW, that's a major point. That's a major position for the folks in Michigan and the Midwest. And so, we didn't hear a lot of those points. We didn't hear a lot of those.
Let me push you on that a little bit.
I agree with that.
Yeah, let me push you on that, because we've been sort of theorizing and guessing to some extent why Kamala Harris was taking certain positions. Donald Trump seems to have a wider field here. Republicans are pretty organized. They're pretty consistent. They're going to vote for Donald Trump because they want their issues advanced, even if Donald Trump isn't their ideal candidate. Republicans are going to vote for Donald Trump, right?
Correct.
So when he doesn't raise the issues that you care about, that you just addressed, help me understand why. Also, Donald Trump made a very interesting move, right? He starts with the conspiracy theories and the lies about, and I just have to call them lies, the lies about, people having abortions in the 9th and 10th and 12th month, people in nursery school having abortion, people getting aborted when they're in middle school. Donald Trump tells these extravagant lies about abortion, not to make light of it, but but he does this, right? But then when they say, well,
middle school, Mark.
I'm just saying it's just as implausible and untrue as what he actually said, right? But then.
So I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that they're lies.
Here's the question.
You would say that. What are they? What are they? They're not lies. What are they?
So if you look at a CNN, if you look at a CNN article,
what are they?
Let me get to the question first.
I wouldn't say that it's lies.
No, he said they're not lies. What are they? What are they?
The bill did not pass, but Governor Ralph Northam did support late-term abortions.
You use a lot of words. If they're not lies, what are they? Is it fact?
And CNN even covers on how he's getting back. Governor
yes or
Ralph
no?
Northam got backlashed on his point. So
yes. Okay, you said what he didn't say was not a lie. Was it a fact? The answer is no. So this is all this creative energy around.
So hold on. I'm going somewhere. Hold on, David, hold on. Diante, the reason I'm using the word lies because Donald Trump on multiple occasions has said there are states that allow.
He is a liar. He is allergic to facts.
That allow for 9th month abortion. There is no state that allows for the 9th month abortion. You are now.
He also said abortion after people have been born, which is not abortion at all.
Right. And Diante, hold on. Everybody stop. Diante, what I'm saying is Donald Trump didn't say there are people who are proposing that. He's saying there are states where it's happening. Even the evidence you've just shown to defend Donald Trump doesn't say what Donald Trump said. What Donald Trump said, again, is there are states where 9th month abortions happen, meaning after the baby's born in the 9th month, they're getting aborted, or even in the night. There's no state where that's true. He was fact checked. It was proven not to be true. And hold on, hear me out. The reason why I'm calling it a lie and not just a mistake is because he's done it 3 times. If you say to me, what time did night school start tonight? And I say 10 o'clock, and Tiffany says, no, Mark, it actually started at 9. Cool. I made a mistake. I misspoke, right? Even though it's my show, it's questionable, but you can trust me. If I say it 3 more times in the same conversation, at some point you got to ask, either I don't understand time, either I'm lying about time, right? Like something's got to give here. And so that's why I'm using the word lie. But I don't want to get hemmed up on the word lie. My point is Donald Trump took a very hardcore, speaking to the hard right on abortion at one moment. And then when he's asked about a federal abortion veto or a federal abortion ban, whether he would veto the bill or not, he seemed to hedge a bit. Donald Trump at one moment has said, hey, we need more time. 6 weeks isn't enough. But other times he's taken a step back. I guess what I'm asking is that I want to ask the same question I've asked of Kamala Harris. Is Donald Trump trying to play to the moderates? Is he trying to show that he's not an extremist? Or does he have a position that's simply not the same as his hardcore right-wing evangelical brethren? That's the question.
Well, I agree. I think both parties, and Donald Trump included, are playing to moderates. I mean, right now, Republican voters don't matter, Democratic voters don't matter. Right now, it's the independent show. And if you're an independent, that's who is important. And so both sides are trying to relate to the independents and folks who are on the fence and swing voters. So yeah, I agree. I think he is definitely trying to do it just like Kamala's trying to do it. Both of them are trying to do it. That's what happens 50 days out from the election.
So now, Diante, let's get at the actual answer. He didn't give a straight answer on whether or not he would veto a federal ban on abortion or a federal abortion bill, excuse me. Where does Donald Trump, if a bill comes across his desk for a federal abortion ban, does Donald Trump sign the bill or does he veto the bill?
I can't speak for him. I can't speak
Aren't you a surrogate?
I can't speak on where the president.
Isn't that literally what a surrogate does?
I mean, listen, I'm just saying I can't speak on whether he would veto or sign the bill. I don't know. I'm not in that era. But I can say it's like, just like he said, is that with Roe v. Wade, the power is back in the hands of the states, which is back in the hands of the people. And so, just like Ohio made their decision, other states will make their decisions. And I think that's what everyone actually wanted, is for people to be able to decide what they wanted. So the folks in Illinois can decide that they want abortions legal, while the folks in Tennessee or Mississippi can decide that they want it illegal. I think that is the power is back in the hands of the people.
Diante, do you believe that for all laws and rules, or just abortion?
Actually, I believe that all laws should be in the hands of the states.
So whether or not
the government is too big.
So Black people's right to access public accommodations, you feel like should be up to the states?
I think civil rights issues. We've been there. But when we come when I say we've been there,
pause you like I paused David. We've been there with Roe v. Wade too, right? We've been there with lots of stuff that y'all want to redo. So the question is, do you believe that all laws should be up to the states, or should some not be?
I mean, there's some nationally, yes, that should be up to federal.
I see why you are Donald Trump, because
when it comes to laws like such as education, like funding or education, when it comes to laws that are specific to a state, yes, I think that they should be depending on the people of the state. And not, when I say the states, I'm not saying the lawmakers of the state, I'm saying the people. They should be on the ballot. I think everything should have an opportunity to be on the ballot, to where the people who live there can make their decision.
So let me ask you this, Diante, would you also support the abolishment of the Electoral College, since you believe that the vote should be in the hand of the people?
No, because Electoral College is a national thing. I mean, it's a national thing to where, California can't say, oh, we're going to abolish Electoral College, and New York is going to say we're not going to do it, and the electoral process still works. So you can't say that, one state can't. That's a national thing where everybody the whole country has to decide that. And in abolishing Electoral College,
but if you were
give everybody.
Would you agree with me that if I agree with you, the vote should be in the hand of the people? So
Correct.
Have a party in the background. So I agree with you. The vote should be in the hand of the people. The Electoral College currently disrupts a lot of that. So if you and I had to decide right now, let's say you and I were working together to fix voting rights,
how does the Electoral College?
We should get rid of Electoral College.
Hold on, before we do Electoral College, I don't want to focus too much on Electoral College. I want there's something about this debate that I want to press.
Sorry, he said it should be in the hand
of the people. I get why you asked it. Okay, and that could be a whole different segment. I want to ask you one more question, Tiffany. I'm gonna bring David back in. David is gonna be on his best behavior, as always. You can at least pretend you are, David. He ain't even looking like you're going.
Don't do him like that.
Right, Tiffany. I think, and I said this earlier, I think one of the most indistinguishable moments between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris was on the question of Palestine. It felt like they were trying to out-empire each other. It felt like, the accusation was she hates Israel. And she's like, no, I don't. Let me tell you how much I don't. He said he told her that she disrespects Netanyahu. And that was the proof that she hates Israel, so much so that she didn't show up for the joint chamber session special.
He said, and I quote, that she went to a sorority party, which was not true. That was also a lie, but keep going.
He didn't just say a sorority party. He said her sorority party, meaning not only did he lie on her, but he called her a Zeta. I'm just saying. But
I am a GDI, as you all call it. So I'm going to
I'm
stay
being
out
a
of
little
that
petty.
conversation.
I'm being a little petty. But
I know you are.
But the
You're not gonna get me.
But the question is, in seriousness, as somebody who cares about Palestine, I know you care about Palestine. I've been with you in Palestine.
I'm about to say, you better tell these people I've been to Palestine with you.
Oh, I'm sorry. We were both there at the same time, allegedly. I know you were there and I was there. I heard you were there. They said it was a black person. I assumed it was you.
We're gonna fight when I see you.
Maybe
those are fighting words.
Maybe it was Tiffany
We're gonna
Haddish they
fight.
were talking about. Maybe they said it was
Oh my God. No, you did not, Tiffany Haddish.
I just heard there was a Tiffany
She
there.
went to Israel and she was a Jewish woman, and you're gonna sit here and confuse Tiffany Dena Loftin for Tiffany Haddish. And for the record, my hair was like this first, but you gonna throw me under the bus like that, Mark?
You threw me under the bus. Look, the point is, talk to me about her response on Palestine. Talk to me about her response on Palestine. No.
Talk to you about her response on Palestine. Well, first of all, let me say this. I want to also acknowledge, and Diante, I think you're gonna love this. Ready? Kamala Harris lied tonight too. She said that on October 7th, okay, that Hamas, which is a terrorist organization, which is also a lie, raped people, and there was sexual violence on October 7th, which is not true. That has been debunked multiple times. So she also lied. I thought you was gonna give me a smile for that, but you didn't. Okay, keep it going. Okay, well, here we go. So I want to name, Mark, that you were absolutely correct, and this is not new information. Okay, the Democratic Party, we saw this at the DNC, has been upholding how much they love Israel when they allowed folks from the Jewish community to come on the stage at the DNC and speak and talk about the loss in their family, but prevent and stop and ignore Palestinian activists and Palestinian people who were outside demanding that they get a chance to speak on the stage and address the entire party in unity, in fairness, in an opportunity to help unite the party, which I completely disagreed with. I know you're saying, but Tiffany, because I can read you this, but I can't hear you because they muted you. But thank you, Gia. And they didn't allow them to do that. And I think that was a huge, huge mistake in the party's strategy to help unify what this election is supposed to be doing. If Kamala Harris, which she just said, is a president or going to be a president for all people, then that includes Palestinian people. And she did not do a good job of answering that question. She's never done a good job, in my opinion, of answering that question. But again, like I said, she is not a radical president. She is not somebody who's going to fight for the liberation of Palestinians. The moderators did such a really great job of asking the question by naming and saying 40,000 Palestinians have been murdered since October 7th. What are y'all going to do about it to stop it? And she did not answer the question, Mark. I hate to say it, but she didn't. She didn't answer the question about what she was going to do differently. What she did say was Israel has the right to defend itself, and we have to come to a two-state solution, which are the safest talking points that she can give because, this is a different segment and I won't spend a lot of time here. I don't think that she believes she has to win the Palestinian movement's vote. I don't think she believes that. I don't think the party believes that. I think I do.
I think that is the calculation. I think that was a calculation.
Okay, that's what I'm saying. I think that's the calculation. I also would say that they think that they're going to get the majority of their dollars in funding and financial support from Jewish folks. There have been two really phenomenal candidates who have run for re-election who have lost their election because of the Palestinian issue, because they've been out fundraised. There have been people who have been kicked off the internet, fired from their job, people who have been rejected from being able to perform at stadiums because they have supported Palestine. And I think Kamala Harris is a Black woman, or however she wants to identify, but I'm just saying, we'll talk about that in a second. I think that she is going to say, hey, I'm not going to touch this issue with the far stick. I'm going to stay at the safe point of supporting Israel so they can defend themselves. And I do think, unfortunately, and this is a longer conversation internally for organizers and activists and leaders to continue to have, because we've had this conversation, which is how do we move our strategy so that they have to respond and be on the right side of history on this case while they run for president. But I will say, and Mark, I don't know if you would agree with me, you've written many books about this. I will say that even in the violence of it all, I think that as activists and organizers, we should take a little bit of a moment to be proud of how far we have pushed this issue, that Palestine was even mentioned on a presidential debate stage. I know that sounds real wonky, but I am looking at this issue because when I was in college, we couldn't even say Palestine. So we're coming a long way, and we need to keep pushing.
Fair enough. I want to bring David in and Diante. I want David to jump back in. Diante, I know you have to run in a few minutes, so I want to make sure you get a last word in here, and you can also tell us sort of where you think Donald Trump's campaign is going and what this all means. David, jump on in though. I know you've heard a lot. You've digested.
I don't want him to feel bullied on some Zeus Network stuff. So let him go, and then I'll jump in.
Okay, Diante, talk to me about this sort of outcome. You said to me you didn't think either person won, and not to take it to the schoolyard, but where I grew up in school, even in the hood, like if you got into a fight and somebody said to you who won it, if you said it was a tie, it probably mean you lost. I ain't never told somebody it was a tie if I won, or if it was close. People are going to hear your analysis as a Trump surrogate and say, if the Trump people are saying it was a tie, when they went in thinking they were going to mop the floor, to use their language, with Kamala Harris, is that a victory for Kamala Harris?
So when I look at debates, I think about not whether the two people debate, especially political debates, two people that have debated have won or lost. I look at, did the American people win? And
oh, come on! No. Don't give me the talking point.
No, it's not.
You
it's
sure
not
you went for Donald Trump? Because he wouldn't even say that.
No, it's not a talking point. This is just how I look at it. Did the American people win? And did they get what they need? That's the purpose of a debate. Is did the people get what they needed from it? Did the voters get what they needed from it that will give them the insight on who they should vote for? That's how I look at a debate. Now, you can
or who they shouldn't vote for, which is they
shouldn't vote for. Now, whether that is the Republican answer or not the Republican answer or a moderate answer, that's just my answer, and I can't change it. Is that's how I look at debates. That's how I've always looked at debates, whether it's two Republicans going against each other, two Democrats going at each other, or Republican and Democrat, is did the people get what they needed from it? That's just my answer.
And if you walked away from this debate feeling like Donald Trump didn't give the American people what they wanted, because you already went in thinking Kamala wouldn't, I would imagine if you're a Trump person, you probably would have gone in assuming she can't. How disappointed are you that Donald Trump didn't give the American people what they needed?
I'm not disappointed. I just think that we're so far we're so close to election day that everyone has made their decision already.
But the data doesn't show that. The polls don't show that. So many people are still.
And the streets don't say that either. Because I'm in the streets organizing people, and the students and young folks, they have not made their decision. So that's not true.
I guess let me ask a question. Do you think that I, as a Black same-gender-loving man, should I have the same right to marriage protections as you do?
Yes. Are you talking to me?
No, I'm not talking to you, Tiffany. I'm talking to the
I say yes.
I know.
Yes.
I know.
I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to him. You know who I'm talking to.
I'm not going to debate to get into that conversation.
It's not a debate. It's a
question. I do have another interview I have to go to. I really do have another interview that I'm already.
The answer is no. So
I'm
here's
already
the thing.
5 minutes over.
Go. Go.
Thank you, Diante. Thank you for joining us. Yeah. Everybody. Everybody.
Ask and answer. Go.
That was Diante.
So let me just name my frustration, and I'm going to say this to everybody on record. Don't invite me to have these polite conversations with niggas who are grifters who don't give a fuck about Black people. Don't do it. Don't do it. I'm not the one. Don't do it. For everybody involved, he answered my question, and it was explicit at the end, but it was implicit all the way through. I go back to, here's my frustration. And I want to make it explicit for folks who are not sure why I got this smoke that Tiffany name she had when we started this conversation. What I know as a Black person who lived under the Trump administration is I don't want that trauma. I don't want the trauma. I experienced it. I'm in therapy still to this day, reconciling it. And I don't want to deal with it. I don't want to ask whether or not my fiance and I, a man who I love, who anchors me, who allows me to show up and exist on purpose, can exist safely. I don't want to have these conversations that radical Republicans feel are just policy fodder. This is actually my life. This is actually my life. And so in a world where principal position, I get it. We got to push. The three of us are radical by definition. We talked about this earlier. They're different. Progressive is not a radical. They're not synonyms. Words matter. This is why Toni Morrison helped us to appreciate the importance of words. They get onto things, into us. The three of us are radical. We believe that all of us should be free. But that nigga believes that I don't get to take up oxygen in the way that I exist. And we can have a conversation about that. That's energy for Trump and everybody who is associated with MAGA. And my only issue is this. My only issue is this, and I will stop and I will practice deference in this moment. We as a group of principled radical people do not have the same energy for that party. We don't have the same demands. If he doesn't say this about Gaza, I won't vote for him. We only have the energy for our vice president, and it incenses me. It is white supremacy in the worst forms of its manifestation. That we are critical. If she don't say this about Gaza, if she don't do this about this, if she don't, but also not appreciating if she flips on this position, she's going to be offered up as vulnerable to people that say politicians can't do that. In a world where she's also not a white man, she's a biracial woman who is dealing with all that comes with white supremacy. So I'm saying to everybody, you all know how I'm coming and how I enter the arena. I want all of us to get free. And what I know is I don't agree with Kamala Harris on every position. I work for Barack Hussein Obama and Michelle Yvonne Robinson Obama. I don't agree with every position that they took. That's not where I am. But if y'all want to label me whatever, you can label me that. I'm about Black people getting free and thriving. And what I know with every fiber of my being is I can debate and discuss this with Kamala Harris, a Madam Vice President Harris administration. And Trump wants me dead. And so to that grifter, that conservative, that nigga, fuck you and your principled positions, period, full fucking stop. Don't invite me to have conversations with these grifters again, Mark. I love you, but I will not do it.
So I don't know if he's a grifter or not. Let me say that first. He could just be wrong. No, he
just said when I asked him a direct question, he didn't want to debate. It wasn't a debate. It was a yes or no question.
No, he definitely avoided that. He definitely avoided your question.
He definitely avoided it. He could have said yes or no.
A black person, do you believe that I should have entitlement to the same rights that you vociferously defend? Otherwise, why you're a Republican? But if you can't answer that question for me, I know where you stand. We don't.
I definitely know where you stand.
We don't have to discuss it.
I mean, me and Mark answered the question. You wasn't even talking to us, so
yeah, no. I guess the way I'm thinking about it, there might be another way to think about what you're talking about, David. Not from Diante's perspective, right? Diante represents a party that does not want us to get free. Whatever we is, right? Any we that I'm a part of, any we that anybody on this call is a part of, they ain't trying to get free. Whether it's women, whether it's black folk, whether it's queer folk, whether it's Kappas, it don't matter. Like they don't want none of them.
Disabilities was named in the chat earlier. Yep.
They don't want none of them free, right? Not in any substance. There's no commitment to it. But as somebody in the chat said, there's also a way that radical, if we're talking about radical and radical transformation, getting to the root of this, changing the way systems operate, changing the systems themselves. No mainstream corporate political candidate is going to do that. And I think maybe the reason why we don't apply the same pressure to Trump as we do Kamala Harris is because we don't have an expectation of Donald Trump, right? I know Donald Trump ain't gonna get us free, but too often when we have an option of a radical candidate and a status quo liberal candidate, the liberal candidate is positioned to us as the only logical or reasonable path that we can get free. And they sometimes overstate, or it's overstated for them what they're going to do for us. So the reason why I want to know where she stands on Gaza is because I want the genocide to end. I know Trump won't end it, but it seems like Kamala won't either. And so if I get to ask the right questions 6 months ago or a year ago or 2 years ago, maybe we don't have Kamala. Maybe we have somebody else.
All of that is right, but here's what I struggle with, which is in this moment, literally in this moment where we watch AIPAC take out Cori Bush,
Jamal Bowman.
Yeah, I said that.
One could argue Mondare, but before that, one of the first 2 Black queer candidates who was in the House of Representatives. Name a viable candidate who has taken that position who is still in office. I'll wait.
I said that already.
Would you say that about gay marriage?
What I say? What about gay marriage?
If 10 years ago you were pushing for there was a moment where
here's what you let me name it. I will play the game. I will jump in the double dutch ropes and let me just name.
No, but I want the audience to hear my question.
10 years ago is different. 10 years ago is different. 10 years ago is different.
Listen to the question, because the audience, even if you know what I'm going to say, the audience doesn't. Right? What I'm saying is that there was a moment where supporting gay marriage or marriage equality was a loser. Nobody had ever run for office on that position and won. And if someone had said at that moment, we can't pick that issue. No one has a good position on that and win, so we can't. That is off the table as a reasonable, fair issue. I think you would have said we got to start somewhere. So I'm saying, why can't we take that same energy to Gaza?
I don't. Here's the thing. I want to meet in the middle, which is where Madiba left us, which is Gaza and South Africa. So again, we are the same people on this issue. But what I know is Kamala Harris is in a very different position than Donald Trump. So what I don't begrudge is people who are saying, let's push her as much as we can. But in this moment, what I ask myself as a rational, critical thinking being is, will I actually know where she is as a person versus how she's navigating this political system that she's in? Those are 2 very separate things. And what I then backed myself into, again, critical thinking. The nigga tried it earlier. I know he's watching, although he said he had to go. But what I think about as a student of history is name a leader of a country that has taken this radical position who's in office now. It doesn't exist.
Wait, and I also want to ask the question to brainstorm, and this is for the listeners too. I have been meditating on this for a minute. We have a biracial, we have a Black woman running for president, which is unprecedented in this moment, against a rapist, narcissist, criminal, liar, all the things, while she is also currently working for Joe Biden, who has said out loud publicly that he is a Zionist and that he is a capitalist, and he will not change his position on that. And I wonder, and this is, I don't know if we'll ever know, but I wonder how much, to your point, David, about her personally versus her running for president, how much of what she gave us tonight is being limited by not only her. Mark, I'm asking the question.
This is my thinking face, not my disagreement face.
Okay. By her being a Black woman running currently as the vice president, working for a white capitalist Zionist, while also trying to keep the Democratic Party happy, which is a bunch of white people who didn't want to see Joe Biden leave in the first place, at the same time, who didn't want to see Joe Biden in the same place. Now, no. That is not me excusing her for her answers tonight, because I am unapologetically right now and yesterday, free Palestine, period, full stop. Right?
Same.
I've been 3
but
times.
Here's the thing.
I don't know how.
All of us
I don't speak Arabic like Mark, but I have been 3 times, and I've led a delegation there myself. So and I've seen it for myself, the violence that is happening in Palestine, and I wanted to stop.
Mark more than both of us, and me less than you. But all of us understand, again, the principle of Madiba. If Palestine is not free, South Africa can't be free. And anybody
100%.
who knows me knows that my value is all of us need to get free.
And so my question then is, I don't think that she can win. I don't think that she can win. Shout out to Fannie Lou Hamer. I don't think that she can even win. I don't even think she can be a candidate in this moment if she comes out, tries to be any more radical, or even tries to pretend like she is meeting with radical people because of who she works for currently, and because of the party that she serves. But again, Mark,
this is what vexes me. This is what vexes me is that
people, hold on, David, hold on. People people who are radical in this movement, whether it's the three of us or whether it's our friends or whether it's people in organizing spaces that are literally putting their lives on the line to push for this election to be more than what it has ever been in the past, and for us to have a stronger and wider and bigger and deeper agenda. Those people that I have a list of names, but I don't want to miss anybody, so I won't waste time doing it. It's for us to say seriously, right? Can we win a radical movement in Pennsylvania, in Arizona, in Michigan, in Florida, in these rural counties? I just drove from Atlanta to Los Angeles, and the entire route I saw Donald Trump signs, right? Those folks are not talking about us. They're not talking about Palestine. They're not talking about abortion. They're not talking about student loan debt. And so when you talk about this calculation, Mark, I'm bringing it back to that moment, because I don't even think that she has the flexibility and the space to be the president that she could be or that she might want to be, considering all of those factors. I don't think she's great.
This is also the issue.
Here's what I would say to that, and then David, jump back on it. I'm okay. I agree with your analysis that the candidate that I would
really
want
to
nominate or elect, my person will not win a general election right now in 2024.
Mine neither.
A person with Kamala Harris's policy positions or Barack Obama's or Joe Biden's policy positions when they won would not have won 30 years prior. Jesse Jackson's policy positions in 84 and 88 wouldn't win now, right? Even though he led the way. My point being, I don't have any illusions about what a winning policy agenda can look like. What I don't want to do, though, and we did this with Obama too, is assign to Kamala Harris a kind of radical possibility in her politics. Let me put it differently. I don't want to make assumptions about her politics or be overly generous with what her politics can be against all evidence to the contrary.
I'm not asking you to do that. What I am asking you to do is for us to have an imagination about what we can do to push her. I just want to believe that maybe there's a way that we can have a meeting throughout the rest of her candidacy, right? So we're saying the same thing. Sure. I'm not trying to create her to be somebody that we don't think she is or that she hasn't presented to us, but to say that there is somebody maybe that we might be able to push, and that there is room for us in our politics to be at the end of that goalpost and not be where she's at. We got to move past it.
Let's stay in this space.
I like the idea of being able to say, I want to choose my enemy. I want to choose my opponent. Right?
Sure.
I want to choose
that's what it's been this whole time.
Right. And so I'd rather, if I'm at a war or a grassroots struggle, let me use the word struggle. If I'm in a political struggle, I'd rather be struggling to get Kamala Harris to do something than to struggle to get Donald Trump to do something. I'm with you. At the end of the day, I understand that philosophy. I understand that theory. All I'm saying is that I don't want people to have unrealistic expectations about what they're getting. Right. Kamala Harris is not taking an AIPAC talking point simply because Joe Biden has them. And I know you're not saying this, or because that's the position of the mainstream. I've known Kamala Harris 20 years. I met Kamala Harris in 2006. So 18 years ago. Kamala Harris supports Israel. That is her sincere position. She's not lying to y'all. She's not doing it for the vote. She's not doing it for the gram. She believes this. There's a way that the fact that she believes it means maybe she can be persuaded and change. It's not just a kind of ideological stance she's taking for votes. She believes it. So if she's being sincere, then maybe she can be changed. I hear you. But there's no reason to think that she will be. There's no reason to think she'll be anti-capitalist. You're not saying she is. I'm
No. I'm not. I'm sorry. I know you're talking to your audience at the moment, but I do want to interject really quickly if I can, because I want to make sure that it's not. I know that you're not disagreeing with me, but here's what I have to say, and this is why I said imagination, which might sound corny, but I don't know about everybody else and what everybody else does. I actually work directly every single day with student leaders across the country. I teach. I work with state, national, and local and statewide student associations, presidents and vice presidents of student governments on college campuses across the country to do federal policy legislation and to push candidates on issues that matter to make education a right. I'm doing this every single day. And when I talk to these young people, this conversation right here shuts them down completely. They already don't want to be involved in politics as it is. So I have to, as an organizer, have a little bit of imagination to say, not that a meeting, I saw somebody say that, not that a meeting is going to solve anybody. I'm using meeting as a euphemism for a bunch of other things, but that we have to do organizing, that we have to push Kamala Harris, that we have to have an agenda that is in front of her, that is past her, that she has to continue to chase and meet so that she can continue to keep not only the youth vote, which we have not named is the most important vote, I think, in this entire conversation, but these young millennial people who are going to be voting for the very first time. And we have to, if anybody is listening that is a young person, if we say to them, Kamala Harris can't be moved, this is who she's been, this is who she's going to be, these people are not going to show up to vote. And then your question about the calculation is going to be messed up, because now I'm trying to stop cussing because Deante's not here. It's going to be fucked up because people, it's going to be fucked up because people are not going to want to be involved in the process. If we talk about politics just being dead the way that it is, who wants to be involved? I for damn sure don't want to be involved. I will go be an oceanographer and work in an aquarium. I do not want to be here if we think that politics can't move. So if we can't imagine a free Palestine, not in 10 years, but by the end of this year, in the next 2 weeks, then right now, then what are we doing even having this conversation if it's going to be the way that it is? That's all. I'm sharing that to your audience.
No, that's a great thing. We got some questions coming in from YouTube, our YouTube Q&A. I want to pose those to some of you, and we also have some super chats coming in. I got to answer. Some are directly targeted toward you all. For example, CC said, "I need this answer, so I'm tossing my coins in. How is genocide a singular issue, Dr. Zeus?" I think they're saying Zeus is in like Zeus TV. I'm sure that's for David Johns. I'm
now Lemuel Plummer. I become Lemuel. Is that what it's?
You think genocide is a singular issue, David? Answer the question.
Well, in fairness, what you said was you can't afford to get
a singular issue, so I'm not answering that question.
Well, but I'll phrase it differently because I know what they're asking you. There was a moment where you said you can't afford to be a single issue voter, and they're saying right, and they're saying that Gaza is not a single issue because genocide is brought. They're saying the genocide in Gaza makes it not a singular issue. That's what they're saying to you.
The genocide in Gaza makes it not a singular issue.
Or better yet, how is Gaza? Why do you see Gaza as a singular issue? I would imagine what they're saying is that Gaza is bound up in, like you said in the Medieval print, that it's connected not just in an abstract way, but there's direct connections between what's happening in Congo or Gaza or Sudan and Israel, what's happening in the United States, our funding, our domestic spending, our foreign, that all this stuff is bound up. Is it really a singular issue, or why do you see it that way? That's what CC is asking you. And she paid $5 for that question. So
CC, I appreciate the question. Let me be clear that Black people don't have the luxury of being single issue voters, and that's not a Davidism. It's I can't think of the member of the Congressional Black Caucus who wrote a book about this actually being a thing. I want to attribute this to him. And what I know is that we don't have this luxury. What I know as a Black, same-gender-loving man is that I can't pick a single issue to hang my hat on, which is why I have this energy that I have in this moment. And so what I can appreciate is that I'm sure there are people who don't know me, how I enter the arena, who might have brought their issues to my commentary and that landed in the way that I didn't intend for it to. And I would hope that you would engage with me so that we could build and you could appreciate the way that I have always shown up, because I'm not new to this. I'm true to this. Period.
David, I'm gonna ask a provocative question. If you're not a single issue voter, right, and I believe you, what do you do if Kamala Harris had the exact same policy position she had on every issue, except she thinks that being gay is a sin and gay people should not be allowed to be married or have the same rights?
Why did you do that, Mark?
Well, here's the thing. Thankfully, here's the thing. I appreciate the contrarianism of it all.
No, what I'm getting at is
no, words matter. But no, in a world where, like, again, devil's advocate, the devil doesn't need an advocate. What I know is that she's not there. Kamala Harris, as the governor, the lieutenant governor, as the AD, whatever the position was, this is when I'm like, I need to take a nap.
Attorney General.
As Attorney General, she officiated top cop, Black cop, whatever people want to say. She officiated same-sex marriages. And then the state of California, which I am from, overturned those officiations. So she was supporting same-sex marriage before it was the law of the land. And so while we're in this space, while we're in this space,
my point is there are some issues
while we're in this space, here's what I want to say. While we're criticizing what Kamala could or could not do, because what I know is she supports me as the same gentle-loving man who is proposed to my fiance, who allows me to show up in spaces like this when I'm like, I should have just dropped and dealt with the consequences of it. In 2015, Trump launched a presidential campaign by referring to Mexican immigrants as racist, rapists, and murderers. When Mexico sends its people, they're not sending their best. They're not sending you. They're not sending you. They're sending people that have lots of problems. They're sending people that bring problems to us. They're bringing drugs. They're bringing crime. They're bringing rapists. And some, I assume, are good people. That was 2015. The same year, he pitched his candidacy to us as Black people by saying that, quote, what the hell do you have to lose? You're living in poverty. Your schools are no good. Your jobs are no good. 58% of your youth are unemployed. What the hell do you have to lose? That was 2015. 2017, Trump said he attacked the NFL players who were kneeling in support of John Lewis and Justice for Policing. He said they're kneeling or otherwise silently protesting during the national anthem. And then he said in the same year, those who protest from Haiti, they all have AIDS. He lamented people who came to the US from Nigeria and said they'll never go back to their huts. Their huts, because he think we live in huts. This was 2017. Let's advance 2020. Trump said he ordered his aides to revamp racial sensitivity training at federal agencies so that no longer refers to white privilege. This was the Ronald DeSantis, the failed history teacher turned governor. They were in collusion. They were in cahoots. That was 2020. The same year he said that SARS-CoV-2, what we now know as coronavirus, was a Chinese virus. He said it was the Kung flu because he's a master with words. So he said the World Health Organization should not invest in that in that disease because it was Chinese shit that we don't have to worry about. Let's fast forward to 2024. I'm gonna come close to home, Mark, as a journalist, somebody who was studied to show themselves approved. He said during an interview with the National Association of Black Journalists, he's been the best president for the Black population since Abraham Lincoln. He said he questioned Kamala Harris's heritage in that moment. I didn't know she was Black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn Black. And now she wants to be known as Black. So I know, is she Indian? Is she Black? It was a birtherism shit that he attacked our president, Barack Hussein Obama, on. I am saying to y'all as people who know me and love me, don't invite me into these manufactured conversations with people who don't care about democracy because the stakes are clear. We have lived through a trauma.
Tiffany, I know you got to run. We all got to run. I'm gonna give Tiffany the last word. Whatever. Tiffany, you have
wow. Okay. Wow. Thank you, gentlemen. Well, let me say two things. One, I want to fact check the audience because there were folks who were saying that I was advocating for lying to young people and students to be involved in the election. And I just want to say that I think you misunderstood what I was saying. I am a person who believes that all of these elections should be and have always been in the hands of the people. And that includes young people, and that young people should be able to make those decisions when it comes to not only their agency and who is in charge over policy in their communities, and also who gets to be the president. And if we tell them that you just have to vote because we only have two options, or your ancestors died for you, or you don't really have a choice because the Electoral College is going to make the decisions for you, or the election has already been determined, our young people would not turn out. And what I am saying is that all of us have a responsibility to pass the torch, because I'm 35 now, to pass the torch to young people who want to be involved in the elections and also want to run for candidacy on their own. So I just wanted to fact check that. Folks were saying that I should lie to people, and I would never do that as an organizer. The second thing I will say is we have 56 days left. Mark, you have an incredible platform. You have always had a space for real conversation. I've never seen it this exciting, but I've never seen it like this. But I've been watching you on every single platform you have been on. So I want to say thank you for having me and David and Diante, even though he's not here, because we were the right people to have this discussion afterwards. We need spaces that are safe, smart, and strategic for us to be able to talk about this election. And you have definitely created that space. Everybody has to vote. And this is not an election that has been determined. We have an option of voting along our values. And I am a person who is going to encourage everybody here to be consistent and to be authentic and to be loyal to their values while also keeping community first, keeping themselves and community first. As we do that, there are going to be people who are going to be on all sides of the aisle and people who don't want to vote. And David might disagree with me, but there are going to be people who don't want to vote. And if they don't want to vote, don't let them vote. Because if they don't agree that this is along with that, you don't agree with that? Okay, you do agree with that. Great. If there are 55 days left, I thought there was 56, but whatever. So if there are people who don't want to vote, I'm going to end.
Time
it
zone.
is 12,
Time
you're
zone,
right.
time
55 time zone, Eastern. You're right. I'm in the Eastern. I'm in Atlanta. And if there are people who don't want to vote, then let them go ahead. But we always need people who are going to push the pedestal, who are going to push the barometer, so that people like us, people like Kamala Harris, not Donald Trump because he's not going to move, can have something that they can deter to. So that's the audience in the background. They turn it up with drinks. I did not drink tonight. I'm driving home respectfully, and you will have a beautiful night. And thank you again, Mark, for having me.
Thank you, Tiffany. Thank you, Dave. By the way, Tiffany has a podcast. You need to check it out. It is called How We Get Free. You can get it where you get podcasts. It's dope. Make sure you check it out. David Johns also has a new podcast that I actually sent an email for today because I hadn't signed up for my interview time. But I did send you an email about 3 hours ago. Check your email. We'll make sure we do that. But follow both of them on the socials. They both do great work. Everybody, hang here. I'm gonna talk. I want to drop a few thoughts in the concluding seconds. But David, Tiffany, thank you so much for joining me. What a spirited and surprisingly spicy conversation we ended up having. I love y'all, all of y'all. Princess, I made your job a little difficult today, as I always do. But thank you for hanging in there with us too. David, Tiffany, thank y'all for rocking with us. There's a couple of YouTube questions I wanted to get at, just to make sure that I answered it. And some of the super chats we posted, I'll see if I can quickly answer a couple of them. One of the questions from YouTube was, Mark, as an internationalist, how can you vote for Kamala Harris? The answer to that question is not an easy one, to be honest. The answer is easy. The decision isn't. As an internationalist, I believe that any vision of freedom that I have is bound up in the liberation of people, of oppressed people around the globe. And I believe that any analysis of our oppression within a particular space, like the United States, is inseparably linked to an analysis of global suffering. In other words, I can't talk about white supremacy in the United States and not understand what's happening in South Africa, or what's happening in Israel, or what's happening in Ukraine. I can't disconnect these things. And so my freedom dream, my liberation, is anchored by a very sober and practical analysis. At the core of it is an understanding about what voting does in the American democratic context. My vote, particularly in a presidential election, is not intended to be, nor could it be, an articulation of my political aspiration one-to-one. In other words, me choosing Kamala Harris doesn't mean that Kamala Harris's values reflect the world I want to see. Me choosing Donald Trump doesn't mean that. Me choosing Bill Clinton or Barack Obama or Hillary Clinton or Jill Stein or Claudia de la Cruz or anybody, it's always part of a strategy. Voting is a tactic. It's not the overall strategy, it's a tactic. Voting is not a reflection of my personal philosophical values. It's an expression of them, of those values. What's the world I want to see? What's the best outcome that we can get, and how do we get there? If I vote in this particular election for a third-party candidate, that's not a bad choice. That's not a wrong choice. But I have to have a good faith commitment that the third-party choice that I'm making will either short-term or long-term lead to the kind of world that I want to see. For much of my life, I have voted for the third-party candidate because I believe that choosing the third-party candidate will ultimately yield an outcome that is in the interest of our liberation. What that means in terms of Green Party voting, and I've been a Green Party member for 2 decades, is I believe that even though the Green Party won't win a particular election, we will build momentum, we will build the party, we will expand our agenda, we will win local and statewide elections, and we will build up a power structure so that we can eventually take over our ideological neighbor, our closest ideological neighbor, which would be the Democrats, not the Republicans, so that we can ultimately change American politics and change American society and global society, speaking in internationalist terms. I've been increasingly less confident in the way the third parties have operated. So it's a pragmatic choice I'm making. Hey, I don't think we're doing a good enough job doing the work of a third party to believe that my vote in the short term, or the loss we would take in the short term, is justified by the victory in the long term. I'm not sure we're positioned well for the long-term victory with that choice. Also, different political matchups and different political contexts demand different results. Right now, if Donald Trump were to be president again, it's not just what he would do over the next 4 years. Let's say he chooses two more Supreme Court two more Supreme Court appointees. Let's say that Donald Trump makes a decision, other decisions at the federal, just at the judicial appointment level, at the federal level, it's at the circuit level, etc., that change the complexion of American law for maybe a lifetime or 2 lifetimes, 2 generations. If that happens, the grassroots struggle, the radical work that we have to do outside the electoral arena, outside the halls of Congress, is that much harder. Sometimes it makes sense. Sometimes you have to weaken the Democratic Party, show them that our votes can't be taken for granted, and drag them to the left. Tactically, I'm just not sure that this is the answer. People point to the genocide in Gaza. Does Kamala Harris show complicity with the genocide in Gaza? Yes. Does Donald Trump show complicity? Yes. So if people are holding the genocide card up and saying, well, there's a genocide, voting for Donald Trump will result in more Palestinians dead in Gaza than voting for Kamala Harris. That's a fact, I believe. And so, yeah, I want to stop the genocide. And no, I don't think Kamala Harris is going to stop the genocide. I don't think any of them are going to stop the genocide. I don't think any of them are going to stop the genocide. But if we're just speaking raw numbers, I think Donald Trump makes the genocide worse than Kamala Harris. And they both are not good on this issue. I agree with David. We can't be single issue voters. I think where David is wrong, or where I disagree with him, and I think we all have issues that if a person took that position, we would say no. That's why I asked him about the LGBTQ issue. But I would ask the same thing to a Palestinian. I guarantee you that if Kamala Harris had the right position on Palestine and was calling for a free Palestine from the river to the sea and was going to stop all weapons to Israel, if they were going to do all of that, I guarantee you they would vote for Kamala Harris, even if she had a terrible position on Ukraine and Congo and gay marriage and reparations and everything else. We all are making choices. To me, the question is, what's the most principled choice and what's the most strategically wise choice? That's the answer. And I would never tell a Palestinian or anyone else that they have to vote for Kamala Harris. And after tonight, where she misrepresented the sexual assaults that happened on October 7th, after she basically said she's never going to stop giving Israel a blank check and an endless weapons purse, I can't make somebody vote for Kamala Harris. I can't demand that. But I also understand somebody saying that that's not the only issue that they can think about. So and that's why the vote your conscience answer isn't just a platitude. It's a very, very, very difficult decision to make, and we all got to make it. But as an internationalist, our collective global liberation demands that we make choices that are strategically and tactically wise, not just ones that look good. Anyway, there's a couple. I need one more minute. And Princess, if you got to run, I understand it's late. I can land the plane if I have to, because I know it's late. But I just want to make sure that I at least get at some of your super chats here. Of the Green Party, does ever become strong with the outweigh the Democratic Party? How would it be different, or would its popularity depend on eventually consuming that of the existing Democratic Party? Christian, that depends. I mean, there's there's a very real reason to believe that if the Green Party gains momentum, we can give people permission to believe and to know that we can have a world without prisons, that we can have a world without a military-industrial complex, that we can have a world without the oppression of Palestinians, that we can reimagine the distribution of wealth in this country, that it doesn't just have to become Democratic Party by another name, but that it can actually become something far more radical, far more visionary, far more beautiful. Glow Vader said, please invite Claudia to your show. She has an invitation. We'll re-invite her. But I just said to my team actually earlier today, we got to try and get her on in the next week or so. So I'm going to do everything I can to get Claudia de la Cruz on, who, of course, represents the Socialist Party. I posted this before. I think this has been articulated. Of course, CC did this. What would make the debate, the world according to Geach said, what would make the debates more exciting, NFL refs throwing penalty flags every time either one told a lie or didn't answer a question directly. They start with 100, deduct 5 points each flag. Look, I'll tell you something. They definitely interrupted each other a lot. They definitely avoided answers. The lie is the easy part sometimes to catch. But for me, it's more like, okay, Kamala Harris, I need you to answer this question about your ideological positions changing. Like, give me a direct answer. Donald Trump, I need you to answer what you're going to do on this abortion bill, etc. Like, answer it directly. And I almost want to see them just keep pressing until the person answers the question. That's what frustrates me the most. There were some other super chats. I seem to have lost them. I'm going to take that as a sign from the good Lord to wrap this thing up, to land this plane. But family, I want to thank you all for watching tonight. It was a ball. A time was had. And I know we got some interesting clips that we're going to show because this thing was wild. Thank you for watching. Sincerely, thank you. Thank you for watching. It's been an absolute pleasure. We'll be back tomorrow night with more. It is the Gaza update. It is new episodes of Night School. It'll be a new episode tomorrow night at 9 p.m. There will also be other content floated to the channel tomorrow. So I really appreciate y'all for watching. If you haven't already, hit the like button and hit the subscribe button. If you are on Twitter right now, or X, or whatever Elon wants to call it, come over to YouTube and hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Also, family, hit the join button. I need everybody who's over here to hit the join button if you're so inclined. Hit the join button and become a financial member of the channel. If you can't make a monthly commitment, family, I have a big ask for you. Putting together a debate night special like this is no small task. I want to thank my team, especially Princess, along with Jess and Cecilia for making this happen. And Princess, double thank you for being behind the wheels tonight for this entire debate. If y'all notice, it moves a lot smoother when Princess is here than when my dumb behind is doing it. But staff costs money, y'all. Footage costs money, y'all. Editing costs money. Studios cost money. We're doing this grassroots media thing, and we believe in it. We want to show the world that corporate media is not the only game in town. We want to keep space and hold space for radical media, Black media, independent media, left-wing media. But to do that, we need your support. So even if you can't become a member and make a monthly commitment, I'm asking everybody to make a one-time commitment right now. If you enjoyed the content, if you enjoyed the debate, if you enjoyed our analysis of the debate, or if you just want to support these kind of media outlets, I'm asking that you go to Cash App, PayPal, Venmo, or Zelle right now. If everybody leaves $1, we're happy. If everybody leaves $1 million, we're really happy. Anything in between, we're happy. But we're asking everybody, if you could, I'm asking if you could leave $10. If you go to Cash App, PayPal, Venmo, or Zelle, if everybody watching right now were to leave $10, if everybody watching right now were to leave a minimum of $10, we can meet our financial goals for the month. Again, if everybody watching right now were to leave $10 on Cash App, PayPal, Venmo, or Zelle, think about it as monthly tuition for night school. If everybody did that, we would meet all of our financial goals for the month. So please, if you can, go to Cash App, PayPal, Venmo, or Zelle and leave $10. Again, if you got to leave less, that's great. If you got to leave more, that's great. Whatever you can do, we're grateful for. But $10 would help us meet our goal across the board. I want to thank you all for watching, and we'll see you tomorrow right here, same time, same place. Peace.